have no husband, no children, and I hate phone calls after work. Yet, one Monday, a stranger demanded I pick up my daughter, who had been left for 2 hours. I laughed, thinking it was a scam, until the teacher recited my address and the last 4 digits of my social. Worse, the file held my signature, and when I arrived, the child looked up as if she had known me her entire life. My name is Violet Watson. I am 34 years old, and I have built a life that functions like a well-oiled machine. I live in Aurora Heights, a quiet suburb on the edge of Kansas City, Missouri, where the lawns are manicured and the neighbors keep to themselves. I like it that way. My apartment is a testament to minimalism. Everything has a place. The coaster sits exactly 2 in from the edge of the coffee table. My shoes are aligned by color in the closet. My existence is a grid and I stay within the lines. I work as a data risk control specialist at Cedarline Risk Analytics. It is a job that sounds boring to most people, and that is exactly why I excel at it. I spend 10 hours a day staring at screens, verifying identities, cross-referencing signatures, and flagging inconsistencies in corporate portfolios. I catch liars for a living. I look for the anomaly in the pattern. The one social security digit that does not match the birth year, the signature that loops a little too wide compared to the file on record. I am the firewall between truth and fabrication. That Monday evening was typical. It was raining, a cold, relentless drizzle that turned the street lights into blurred streaks of orange against the asphalt. I drove home in silence. I never listened to music after work. My brain needs the quiet to decompress from the noise of data. When I unlocked my front door, the air inside was cool and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I hung my coat on the rack, placed my keys in the ceramic bowl, and kicked off my heels. There was only one thing in my apartment that did not fit the perfect order. On the kitchen counter, there was a small stack of envelopes. They were unopened. I knew what they were without looking. Third notices, collection warnings. They were addressed to me, Violet Watson, but they referenced credit cards I had never opened and loans for furniture I had never bought. I had treated them with the arrogance of someone who knows the system too well. I assumed it was a clerical error, a database merge gone wrong. I had filed a dispute online weeks ago and assumed the algorithms would correct themselves. I did not open them because opening them felt like acknowledging a mess I did not create. I simply pushed them to the corner of the counter and turned my back. I was pouring a glass of water when my cell phone buzzed against the granite countertop. The sound was jarring in the silence. I frowned. It was 7:40 in the evening. No one calls me at this hour. My friends know to text. My mother is in Florida and goes to bed at 7. I looked at the screen. The caller ID did not say spam risk. It read Cypress Ridge Elementary. I did not know a Cypress Ridge and the area code was from Arkansas. I swiped to answer, assuming it was a wrong number I could correct in 5 seconds. "This is Violet," I said, my voice clipped. "Ms. Watson." The voice on the other end was female, high-pitched, and laced with a mixture of panic and aggression. "Thank God you finally picked up. Do you have any idea what time it is?" I paused, holding the glass of water halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me, the after-school program closed 2 hours ago," the woman said. She was speaking fast, the words tumbling over each other. "We have been calling you for 45 minutes. The janitorial staff is trying to lock up and Elsie is the only child left in the building. You need to be here now." I blinked. The words made sense individually, but together they formed a sentence that had no place in my reality. "I think you have the wrong number," I said calmly. This was my professional voice, the voice I used when explaining to a junior associate why their data entry was flawed. "I do not have a child." There was a silence on the other end. It was the heavy, stunned silence of someone who thinks they are being pranked. "Ms. Watson," the woman said, her tone dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. This is not funny. Elsie is sitting right here in the office. She has been waiting for you since school let out. She is 5 years old. She is tired. She is hungry and she wants her mother. I am sure she does, I said, feeling a prickle of irritation. But I am not her mother. My name is Violet Watson. Yes, but I live in Missouri. I have never been to. I pulled the phone away to look at the location tag again. Pine Hollow. You have the wrong Violet Watson. Is this 555-019-4428? The woman asked. My stomach gave a small, uncomfortable lurch. That was my cell number. Yes, I said. But that is a mistake. And is your address 412 Maplewood Drive? Apartment 4B, Aurora Heights, Missouri. The water glass felt suddenly very cold in my hand. I set it down on the counter. A small ring of condensation formed on the granite. Who is this? I asked. My voice had lost its edge of superiority. This is Mrs. Mao Gable. I am the lead coordinator for the extended day program at Cypress Ridge. I am looking at the emergency contact form right now. It lists Violet Watson as the mother. It lists your phone number, your address, your email address, the one at Cedarline Analytics. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. She had my work email, my unlisted work email, the one I only used for internal communications and Heil client verification. That email address was not in the public phone book. It was not on my social media, which I barely used. That is not possible, I whispered. I am looking at your signature, Ms. Watson. Mrs. Gable snapped. It is right here on the liability waiver. Look, I do not care what kind of game you are playing or if you are having a breakdown. If you are not here in 20 minutes, I am mandated by state law to call the police and Child Protective Services. This is considered child abandonment. Wait, I said, do not do that. My mind was racing. I am a risk analyst. I deal in worst-case scenarios. If the police were called to a school in Arkansas for an abandoned child, and that child was linked to my name, my address, and my social security number, a file would be opened, a criminal file. I would be flagged in the national system. My security clearance at Cedarline would be suspended pending investigation. I could lose my job before I even had a chance to prove I had never given birth. I am 2 hours away, I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. I am in Kansas City. I cannot be there in 20 minutes. It is physically impossible. Then you should have left 2 hours ago, Mrs. Gable said. She sounded exhausted. Why did you not send the father? The form says he is unavailable, but surely there is no father. I cut in. There is no child. Listen to me. I need to speak to the principal. You are being scammed. Someone used my information to enroll a child. The principal is gone. Ms. Watson, it is night. It is raining. And I am here with a little girl who is clutching a backpack and asking why her mom is not coming. I am telling you, I said, gripping the edge of the counter. I have never seen that child in my life. Really? Mrs. Gable let out a harsh, disbelief-filled laugh. That is interesting because she is holding her pickup pass. Every student gets one. It has the student's photo and the authorized guardian's photo. I froze outside. Thunder rumbled low and deep, shaking the window pane in the living room. What? I asked. The photo, Mrs. Gable said. The photo of the mother. The one you submitted with the registration packet. Describe it. I demanded. It is you, she said flatly. Dark hair cut specifically at the jawline. You are wearing a gray blazer. You're looking slightly to the left. You have a small mole on your neck, just above the collar. My hand went instinctively to my neck, to the small mole just above my collarbone. I stopped breathing. The description was precise. It was not just a generic description of a woman who looked like me. It was a description of my corporate headshot. The one taken 3 years ago for the Citiline ID badge. The one that was stored on the secure company server. The one that should not exist on a laminated card in an elementary school in rural Arkansas. That is impossible, I said again. But the conviction was gone. Are you coming, or am I calling the sheriff? Mrs. Gable asked. I am done arguing with you. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening. Pine Hollow was 120 miles south. If I stayed here, the police would go to that school. They would run my name. They would see the debt letters I had ignored, the financial instability. They would see a woman who ostensibly enrolled a child and then abandoned her. They would come to my door in Aurora Heights with a warrant. But if I went there, I could prove it. I could walk into that office and show them that while my face might be on the card, I was not the person who signed those papers. I needed to see the paperwork. I needed to see the signature. I needed to know who had stolen my life so completely that they had created a dependent I did not know existed. This was not just identity theft. Identity theft is buying a television on someone else's credit card. This was identity construction. Someone was not just stealing my money. They were building a parallel life using my bricks. I am coming, I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. How long? 2 hours, I said. Maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes with the rain. Do not call the police. I will explain everything when I get there. Just keep her there. I will give you until 10. Mrs. Gable said. If you are not walking through these doors at 10 o'clock, I am dialing 911. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen for a full minute, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a chaotic rhythm that defied my calm exterior. I looked at the unfinished glass of water. I looked at the perfectly aligned shoes in the hallway. I walked to the counter and grabbed the stack of unpaid bills. I tore open the first one. It was a credit card statement from a bank I did not use. The charges were mundane. Groceries, gas, a dentist appointment in Pine Hollow, Arkansas. I tore open the second one, a utility bill for a rental property, not in Aurora Heights in Pine Hollow. My hands were shaking. I had ignored the warning signs because I thought they were errors. I thought I was too smart, too secure, too careful to be a victim. I verified people for a living. I was the hunter, not the prey. I grabbed my purse. I checked to make sure I had my driver's license, my real ID. I grabbed my work badge as well, thinking it might help prove who I was. I put on my raincoat and walked out the door. I locked it behind me, checking the handle twice, a habit I had developed years ago. The drive was a nightmare. The rain had intensified, turning Interstate 49 into a river of black asphalt and blinding headlights. My wipers slapped back and forth, a hypnotic metronome counting down the minutes to a confrontation I could not comprehend. I drove fast, faster than I usually dared. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind played out the scenarios. Was it a prank? A malicious attack by a former employee I had flagged for fraud? Or was it something worse? Was it a doppelganger? I kept thinking about the child. Elsie, 5 years old. I tried to picture a 5-year-old girl. I had no reference point. I did not like children. I found them sticky, loud, and irrational. I had made a conscious choice to be child-free. I valued my silence. And now there was a child waiting for me, holding a picture of my face, believing I was the center of her universe. The absurdity of it made me want to laugh. But the laugh stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. As I crossed the state line into Arkansas, the landscape changed. The suburban sprawl gave way to dense, dark woods. The highway narrowed. Pine Hollow was not a place you passed through. It was a place you had to look for. It was hidden in the valleys, obscured by trees and shadows. My GPS announced that I had arrived at 10 minutes to 10. Cypress Ridge Elementary sat on a hill, a sprawling brick building that looked ominous in the darkness. The parking lot was empty, save for one car under a flickering yellow light, a sensible sedan that likely belonged to the furious Mrs. Gable. I pulled my car into a spot, the headlights cutting through the rain. I turned off the engine, the silence rushed back in, but it was not the peaceful silence of my apartment. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. I checked my face in the rear-view mirror. I looked pale. My dark hair was severe, my eyes wide. I looked like the woman on the ID card, but I also looked like a stranger. I took a deep breath. I told myself I was here to conduct an investigation. I was here to collect data, identify the fraudster, and clear my name. I was not here to be a mother. I was here to be an auditor. I opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. The cold water hit my face, shocking me into focus. I marched toward the lit entrance of the school. I reached for the door handle, cold steel under my palm. I thought I was driving 2 hours to clear up a misunderstanding. I thought I would walk in, show my ID, prove the impossibility of the situation, and drive home to my silent, orderly life. I thought I was taking control, but as I pulled the door open and stepped into the smell of floor wax and old paper, I did not know that I was not the hunter anymore. I was walking into a trap that had been set long before that phone rang. It was a trap prepared with more precision, more detail, and more terrifying accuracy than any file I had ever checked at Cedaline. I was about to meet the daughter I had, and she was going to be the most dangerous thing I had ever encountered. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind me, severing the sound of the rain and replacing it with the aggressive, sterile silence of an institutional hallway. The air inside smelled of industrial floor wax and damp wool. Above me, long tubes of fluorescent lighting flickered with a low, headache-inducing hum. It was the sound of bureaucracy, a noise I knew well from years of corporate audit rooms. But here in this empty elementary school at 10 o'clock at night, it sounded like a warning. I walked down the corridor. My heels struck the linoleum with sharp echoing cracks. Click, click, click. I was conscious of the noise I was making. I felt like an intruder in a space designed for children. A giant wandering through a world of knee-high water fountains and colorful construction paper murals. I saw the light spilling from the main office at the end of the hall. It was a pool of yellow warmth in the blue-white sterility of the corridor. I tightened my grip on my purse. My knuckles were white. I had spent the last 2 hours rehearsing my speech. I was going to be firm. I was going to demand a DNA test if necessary. I was going to threaten legal action for harassment and identity fraud. I was ready to dismantle their lies with the cold, hard logic that made me the best risk analyst at Cedaline. I stepped into the office. The room was cluttered. Stacks of paper leaned precariously on filing cabinets. A woman sat behind the main reception desk, her head in her hands. This was Mrs. Gable. She looked up as I entered, her face etched with the kind of exhaustion that settles deep in the bones. She looked at me, and her expression shifted from irritation to relief. Finally, she breathed, but I did not look at her. My gaze was drawn magnetically to the plastic chair in the corner of the room. A child sat there. She was small, painfully small. She wore a pink puffer jacket that looked a size too big. Swallowing her thin frame, her legs dangled off the edge of the chair, swinging rhythmically back and forth. She was clutching a worn gray plush rabbit by the ear, its fabric matted from years of love. She was not crying. She was not screaming. She was just waiting. I stopped moving. The speech I had prepared dissolved in my throat. I had expected a mistake. I had expected a chaotic child. Perhaps one who was screaming for her real mother, proving instantly that I was a stranger. Instead, the girl stopped swinging her legs. She lifted her head and looked straight at me. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and terrifyingly familiar. She slid off the chair, her sneakers squeaking against the tile. She took a step toward me, then another. She did not run. She walked with a hesitant, hopeful caution. "Mom," she said. The word hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It was soft, barely a whisper, but it sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Mom," she said again, her voice gaining a little more strength. "You came." I stood frozen. My brain, usually a rapid-fire processor of data, ground to a halt. I searched her face for a sign of confusion. I waited for her to blink, to frown, to step back and scream. "That is not her. That is not my mommy." But she didn't. She looked at me with absolute unwavering recognition. She looked at me the way I looked at my own reflection in the mirror every morning. There was no doubt in her eyes, only relief. I started, but no sound came out, Mrs. Gable stood up, smoothing her skirt. "See," she said, her voice dripping with vindication. "I told you she was waiting. Go on, Elsie. Grab your backpack." The girl, Elsie, reached down and picked up a backpack that featured a cartoon unicorn. She walked right up to me. She was so close I could smell the scent of strawberry shampoo and rain on her hair. She reached out a small, cold hand and took mine. My skin crawled, not with disgust, but with a profound, terrifying dissonance. Her hand felt real. Her grip was tight. She held on to me as if I were her anchor in a storm. "I am not." I tried to pull my hand away, but I couldn't bring myself to shove a child. I looked at Mrs. Gable. "I need to see the file now." Mrs. Gable sighed, clearly annoyed that I was continuing the charade. "Ms. Watson, really? It is late. Can we just the file?" I snapped. My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Show me what you have on me." Mrs. Gable scowled, but reached under the counter and slapped a manila folder onto the laminate surface. I let go of Elsie's hand. She made a small noise of protest, but stayed glued to my side and flipped the folder open. I stared at the pages. First, the registration form. Student Elsie Watson, due March 12th, 5 years ago. Mother Violet Watson, occupation risk analyst, Cedar Line. And then, at the bottom of the page, the signature. I felt the blood drain from my face. I traced the ink with my fingertip. It was a blue ballpoint pen. The loops on the V were sharp at the top, just how I wrote them. The W had a slight disconnect in the middle, a quirk I had developed in college to save time. The tail of the end trailed off in a straight line. It was not a forgery. It was not a trace. It was my signature. It looked more like my signature than the one I had signed on a credit card receipt at the gas station 3 hours ago. "This is impossible," I whispered. "I did not sign this." "It was notarized," Mrs. Gable said, pointing to a stamp on the second page. "We require notarization for out-of-district transfers." I turned the page. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. There was a photo stapled to the family background sheet. It was a candid shot printed on glossy photo paper. It showed a woman sitting on a park bench reading a book. Her face was turned away, obscured by a curtain of dark hair blowing in the wind, but the blazer she wore was mine. The watch on her wrist was the vintage silver timepiece my grandmother had left me. I owned that watch. I owned that blazer. Next to the woman, partially out of frame, was a man. But the photo had been cut, literally cut with scissors. Only his arm and shoulder were visible. He wore a flannel shirt. A hand rested on the bench near the woman's knee, and playing in the grass at their feet was a toddler. "Elsie," I stared at the image. I had never been to that park. I had never sat on that bench. I did not own a flannel-wearing husband, but the woman in the photo, the posture, the way she held her shoulders, it was me. It was a ghost of me living a life I had never touched. Is there a problem here? A new voice cut through the air. I looked up. Standing in the doorway of the inner office was a woman who could only be the principal. She was tall, wearing a severe navy suit that looked too expensive for a public school salary. Her hair was sprayed into an immobile helmet of blonde. Her eyes were hard, bead-like, and completely devoid of warmth. "Principal Pierce," Mrs. Gable said, sounding nervous. M. Watson was just checking the paperwork. Principal Sandra Pierce walked around the desk. She did not look at the child. She looked only at me. She moved with the predatory grace of a shark circling a swimmer. "Ms. Watson," Pierce said, "you are 3 hours late. We were moments away from handing Elsie over to the county authorities. Do you understand the severity of this?" "I understand that there has been a massive fraud," I said, trying to regain my footing. I pointed at the file. "I did not enroll this child. I have never seen her before tonight. Someone has stolen my identity." Pies's expression did not change. She looked bored. "We verified your employment. We verified your address. We verified your social security number. And the child identified you immediately. Do you really want to play this game with the police involved? Because if I call the sheriff, they will not just take the girl, they will take you for negligence." I looked at her. I saw it. Then she didn't care if I was the mother or not. She didn't care about the truth. She wanted the liability off her property. She wanted the problem solved before the morning bell rang. "I want a DNA test." I said. "Fine," Pies said. "You can arrange that on your own time right now. You have 2 choices. You sign the custody release form acknowledging you picked up the student and you take her home, or you refuse and I call Sheriff Miller. He will arrest you for abandonment. Put the child in emergency foster care and you can fight your identity theft claim from a jail cell while your employer reads about it in the morning paper." It was a trap. Perfect bureaucratic trap. If I fought now, I would lose. I would be the hysterical woman denying her own child. I would lose my job. I would lose my freedom. And the person who did this to me would disappear into the shadows. But if I played along, I would have the file. I would have the evidence. And I would have the girl. The girl was the key. She knew something. She was part of the script. "Give me the pen," I said. Mrs. Gable handed me a black pen. My hand hovered over the paper. Custody release. I, Violet Watson, acknowledge receipt of Elsie Watson. I signed. I made sure to sign it exactly as it appeared in the file. I was buying time. "I need copies of this file," I said. "The copier is off," Pies said coldly. "And the office is closed. You have what you came for. Please leave the premises." I didn't argue. I pulled out my smartphone. Before Pierce could stop me, I snapped 3 high-resolution photos of the registration forms, the notarized stamp, and the bizarre cropped family photo. "Hey," Pierce stepped forward. "You cannot photograph student records." "I am the mother, aren't I?" I said, flashing the screen off and shoving the phone into my pocket. "They are my records." I looked down at Elsie. She was still holding my hand. She looked up at me with big, trusting eyes that made my stomach turn. She believed this. Whatever lie she had been fed, she believed it completely. "Come on," I said. The words tasted like ash. I let her out of the office. We walked back down the long humming corridor. The sound of my heels was now accompanied by the squeak of her small sneakers. It was a duet I had never asked to perform. We reached the heavy double doors at the entrance. I pushed one open and the sound of the rain roared back into our ears. The cold wind hit us. I looked down at the child. "Elsie," I said, "where do we live?" I needed to test her. I needed to see if she knew my real address or the one on the form. Elsie looked confused. She squeezed my hand. We live at the Blue House, she said. On 4th Street, you know that. 4th Street. That was the address in the file. The Pine Hollow address, right? I said the Blue House. We walked into the rain. I opened the passenger door of my car. I realized I didn't have a booster seat. I didn't have anything for a child. Just buckle the belt tight, I muttered, helping her climb in. She settled into the leather seat. Clutching her rabbit, she looked small against the dark upholstery. Before I shut the door, she leaned forward and tugged on the sleeve of my raincoat. "Mom," she whispered. I paused, water dripping from my hair onto my face. "What? You remembered the rule?" she said softly. "What rule?" "You said if I ever get lost or if the bad people come, I should just find Vi." I froze. Vi? Nobody called me Vi. Not my coworkers. Not my mother. Only one person had ever called me Vi. My college roommate who had died in a car accident 10 years ago. It was a nickname buried in the past. A nickname that did not appear on any credit report, any employment file, or any social media profile. "Who told you to call me that?" I demanded, my voice harsh in the rain. Elsie shrank back, looking frightened. "You did," she whispered. "In the stories." I stared at her, the rain soaking through my coat. This was not just identity theft. This was surveillance. Someone knew things about me that were not in any database. Someone had been watching me for a very, very long time. I slammed the car door shut. I walked around to the driver's side, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was not going to the police station. Not yet. If I went to the police now, I was the crazy woman with a kid who knew her nickname. I needed to see the Blue House. I needed to see the stage they had built for me. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. High above us, mounted on the corner of the brick school building, a security camera swiveled silently. Its red recording light blinked in the darkness. It tracked my car as I accelerated out of the lot, capturing the license plate, capturing the time. I did not know it then, but that footage was already being processed. It would not show a confused woman rescuing a child. It would be edited, spliced, and context stripped. By tomorrow morning, the world would not see a rescue. They would see an abduction. And I was driving straight into the edit. The GPS on my dashboard glowed with a singular, unwavering line of blue, guiding us deeper into the labyrinth of Pine Hollow. The address listed on the school file, 412 Maplewood Drive, was not a house in the suburbs. It was a cluster of low-rise brick tenements slumped against the side of a hill, their facades peeling under the relentless assault of the Arkansas rain. I parked the car under the dripping overhang of an oak tree. The engine ticked as it cooled, a metallic metronome in the silence. I looked at Elsie. She had fallen asleep the moment the heat kicked in, her head leaning against the seat belt strap, the plush rabbit clutched tightly to her chest. I did not want to wake her, but I could not leave her alone. Not here. Not when the shadows between the buildings seemed to stretch and shift with intention. "Elsie," I said softly, shaking her shoulder. "We are here." She blinked awake, her eyes foggy. She looked out the window and frowned. "This is not the Blue House," she murmured. "It is the address on the paper," I said, unbuckling her. "Come on, stay close to me." We stepped out into the mud. The air smelled of wet asphalt and stale cigarette smoke. I led her toward the main building, scanning the rows of doors. There were no numbers, only faded brass letters. A man was standing under the awning of the central office, or what passed for one. He wore a grease-stained undershirt and was smoking a cigarette with the grim dedication of someone who had nothing else to do. I walked up to him, holding my phone with the flashlight on. "I am looking for Unit 4B, I said. "I am looking for a tenant named Watson." The man exhaled a plume of smoke that mingled with the mist. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my tailored coat, then shifted his gaze to Elsie. "No for B here," he grunted. "Apartments are lettered A through H, and I ain't got no Watsons. Never have." "Are you the landlord?" I asked. "Superintendent," he corrected. "I know everybody who pays rent. I got a Miller in a couple of college kids in B, and the rest are short-term leases for the plant workers. No Watsons." "Are you sure?" I pressed. "A woman, dark hair, a little girl." I gestured to Elsie. The man looked at the child again. A flicker of recognition passed through his eyes, but he clamped it down instantly. I said, "No Watsons," he repeated, dropping his cigarette and crushing it with the heel of his boot. "You got the wrong complex. Lady, try the trailer park down on Route 9. He turned and went inside the office, locking the door behind him with a definitive click. He was lying. I knew it. I could read micro-expressions better than I could read novels. He recognized Elsie, but he was afraid. "He is scary," Elsie whispered, pressing her face against my coat. "He is just rude," I corrected, though my heart was beating a rapid rhythm against my ribs. "Elsie, look around. Is this where you live? Is this where you sleep?" She looked at the dreary brick walls and shook her head vigorously. "No, we have a blue door and a mailbox with a bird on it." I looked at the row of mailboxes bolted to the exterior wall near the office. They were rusted metal banks, the kind where you need a key to open the individual slots. There were no birds, just jagged metal edges and graffiti. But something caught my eye. Sticking out of the slot labeled Unit F was the corner of a white envelope. It was not weather-beaten. It was crisp, dry. It had been placed there recently. Perhaps after the rain started this evening. I walked over to it. The slot was jammed. The metal flap bent slightly outward. I used my pinky finger to hook the edge of the envelope and worked it loose. It was a utility bill to Violet Watson. Address 412 Maplewood Drive, Unit F. I stared at the window of the envelope. The bill was for water and sewage. The amount due was $42. The due date was next week. Unit F. I whispered. I looked at the building. Unit F would be on the second floor. Judging by the layout, "Come on," I said to Elsie. We climbed the external concrete stairs. They were slick with moss. Unit F was at the end of the balcony. The door was not blue. It was a peeling beige that looked like bruised skin. I knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. It was locked. I knelt down and looked at the threshold. In the gap between the door and the frame, I saw something that made the hair on my arm stand up. A thin strip of clear tape had been placed across the jamb. It was broken. Someone had entered recently. I stood up and moved to the window. The blinds were drawn, but one slat was bent. I pressed my face against the cold glass and peered through the crack. The beam of a street light filtered into the room, illuminating a small, sad living space. It was empty, not just tidy, but evacuated. There was no furniture, save for a broken chair in the corner, but the floor told the story. The carpet was a dusty gray. Through the layer of dust, I could see distinct parallel lines, drag marks, the kind made by the wheels of heavy suitcases being pulled in a hurry. And near the door, a frantic set of scuff marks as if someone had been running. They had been here. They had been living here, using my name to set up utilities, using this address to register Elsie for school. And today, probably the moment the school called me, they had cleared out. "Do you see my toys?" Elsie asked, trying to jump up to see the window. "No, honey," I said, stepping back. "It is empty, but my stuff." Her voice wobbled. "Mommy said we would go home after school." I knelt down to be eye level with her. The rain was dripping off the balcony roof, creating a curtain of water behind us. "Elsie," I said, keeping my voice steady, When you say mommy, who are you talking about? The lady in the picture. Elsie nodded. Mommy. And who is the man in the picture? The one whose face was cut off. Elsie froze. Her eyes darted to the side, looking at the dark parking lot below. She bit her lip. Cannot say, she whispered. Why not? Mommy said, she said. If I say his name, the bad men will come. Which name? I pressed gently. Is it the name on the papers, Caleb? Elsie flinched. She physically recoiled, her back hitting the brick wall. Her eyes filled with instant, terrified tears. You said it, she gasped. You said the name. Mom said never say Mr. Caleb's name. Mr. Caleb. Not Daddy. Not Father. Mr. Caleb. Okay. I said, raising my hands. I am sorry. We will not say it again. It is okay. I stood up, my mind racing. Caleb Straude. That was the name listed as the secondary emergency contact on the school forms I had photographed. I pulled out my phone. I had the picture of the form on my screen. I dialed the number listed next to Caleb Straude. It rang once. Click. Someone picked up. I heard breathing. Short, shallow breaths on the other end. Who is this? I asked. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. 10 seconds later, a text message appeared. It was from a blocked number. Do not interfere. Go home. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp Arkansas air. This was not a passive scam. This was an active operation. Someone was watching. Someone knew I was standing on this balcony. I grabbed Elsie's hand. We are leaving. Where are we going? She asked, stumbling as I pulled her toward the stairs. To the Blue House. No, I said we need food. I needed to get off the street. I needed a public place with lights and people. I drove 2 miles down the road to a 24-hour diner called the Iron Skillet. It was a beacon of neon in the darkness. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of frying bacon and coffee. It was warm. It was safe. We slid into a booth with red vinyl seats that had been patched with duct tape. I ordered grilled cheese for Elsie and black coffee for myself while Elsie ate, attacking the sandwich with the ferocity of a child who hadn't eaten since lunch. I unlocked my phone again. I opened my credit monitoring app. I needed to see the damage. I had been afraid to look before, but now I had to know. I logged in. The wheel spun for a second. Then the report loaded. My credit score had dropped 100 points. I scrolled down to the new account section. There it was. Pine Hollow Auto Loans opened 3 months ago. Balance $12,000. Quick Cash Personal Loan opened 2 months ago. Balance $5,000. Medical Financing opened last week. Balance $2,000. But it was the dates that terrified me. The loans were small, manageable amounts that wouldn't immediately trigger a fraud alert for a high-income earner like me. They were staying under the radar, but they were consistent. Someone was building a credit history. They weren't just maxing out cards and running. They were establishing a life. They were paying the minimums on some, letting others slide. They were creating a pattern of a struggling single mother. She looks just like you, a voice said. I looked up. An elderly waitress was refilling my coffee cup. Her name tag read, Betty. She had a face mapped with wrinkles and eyes that had seen everything this town had to offer. Excuse me, I said. The little girl, Betty said, nodding at Elsie. Spitting image. Same eyes. I looked at Elsie. She had ketchup on her cheek. She did look like me. It was uncanny. It was as if someone had cast her for the role. Do you know her? I asked, taking a risk. We are looking for her mother. My cousin. She might have been in here. Betty pursed her lips. Pine Hollow is a small town. Honey, everyone passes through here eventually. I pulled up the photo from the file on my phone. The woman with the hair covering her face wearing my blazer. Have you seen this woman? She drives an old car. Maybe stays in a rental nearby. Betty squinted at the screen. Can't see the face, but that coat. Yeah, I have seen a lady in a sharp coat like that. She comes in for coffee on Tuesdays. Does not talk much. Always looks over her shoulder. Do you know where she stays? I asked, sliding a $20 bill onto the table. Betty looked at the money, then at me. She lowered her voice. I saw her getting into a car a few times. A beat-up Honda. She heads out toward the highway. There's not much out that way except the woods and the Driftwood Motel. The Driftwood, I repeated. It is a dump, Betty warned. Pay by the week kind of place. They don't ask for ID if you pay cash. A lot of folks who don't want to be found end up there. Thank you, I said. I watched Elsie finish her milk. She looked sleepy again. Come on, I said. One more stop. I am tired, Elsie wed. I know, I said. Me too. I paid the check and we walked out to the parking lot. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. I buckled Elsie into the car and walked around to the driver's side. As I reached for the handle, I glanced at the road. A black pickup truck was idling across the street, its lights off. I froze. I had seen that truck before. It was parked 2 rows behind me at the elementary school. I remembered it because it had a dent in the front bumper that looked like a jagged smile. The truck sat there, a dark silhouette against the trees. The engine was running. I could see the exhaust puffing into the cold air. They hadn't just texted me. They had followed me. They watched me at the apartment complex. They watched me at the diner. I got into the car and locked the doors. My hands were trembling, but my mind was sharpening. The fear was receding, replaced by a cold, hard anger. They were using my name. They were using this child. And now they were hunting me. I started the engine. I was going to the Driftwood Motel. Not to hide, but because if the woman posing as me was there, I was going to find her before the man in the truck found us. I pulled out of the lot, checking the rear-view mirror. The black truck turned on its headlights. 2 blinding orbs of light filled my mirror. Pulled out behind me, matching my speed. Hold on to your rabbit, Elsie, I said, gripping the wheel. We are going for a ride. The neon sign of the Driftwood Motel buzzed with a dying insect-like hum, casting a sickly pink glow onto the wet pavement. The no vacancy light was flickering, but the parking lot told a different story. It was half empty, populated only by rusted sedans and work trucks that hadn't moved in weeks. I parked my car in the darkest corner I could find, away from the road, constantly checking the rear-view mirror for the black pickup truck. It had vanished a few miles back, but the sensation of being hunted sat heavy in the base of my throat. Stay here, I told Elsie. Lock the doors. Do not open them for anyone but me. Not even if they say they know you. Elsie nodded, her eyes wide and dark in the gloom. She clutched her plush rabbit so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like a prisoner of war, not a kindergartner. I stepped out into the damp air and marched toward the office. The manager was behind a glass partition that was smeared with grease and fingerprints. He was a man who looked like he had been constructed out of tobacco smoke and bad decisions. He didn't look up from the small television on his desk when the door chimed. We are full, he grunted. I am not looking for a room, I said, sliding my Cetaline business card under the glass. It was a reflex. My badge was my shield. I am looking for a guest, Violet Watson. The manager glanced at the card, then at me. He sneered. I don't give out guest info. Privacy policy. Privacy policy implies you run a legitimate establishment, I said, my voice dropping to that cold analytical tone I used when informing a CEO their security protocols were garbage. I am a risk control officer. I am tracking a sophisticated identity fraud ring involving federal banking statutes. If I walk out of here and call the sheriff, they will not just look for the woman. They will look at your ledger. They will look at your cash transactions. They will look at the long-term residents you are not reporting to the housing authority. It was a bluff mostly, but men like him always had something to hide. He hesitated. His eyes flicked to the register. Room 112, he muttered. End of the row. She paid cash for the week. Haven't seen her in 2 days. Key, I demanded. I ain't giving you a key. Then you are obstructing a federal inquiry. He slammed a rusted key onto the counter. If she trashed the place, you are paying for it. I took the key and walked out. I didn't run. Running attracted attention. I went back to the car, tapped on the glass, and signaled for Elsie to unlock it. Is Mommy there? She asked as I helped her out. We are going to see, I said. Room 112 was at the far end of the complex where the noise from the highway was a constant roaring ocean. The curtains were drawn tight. I stood before the door. It was slightly ajar, just a crack. The wood around the lock wasn't splintered. It hadn't been kicked in. It had just been left open. I pushed the door with my fingertips. It swung inward silently. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the metallic scent of blood. Thank God it was the smell of sickness, stale sweat, unwashed sheets, and the thick cloying heat of a room that hadn't been aired out. Mommy, Elsie whispered. The room was dark, illuminated only by the light from the parking lot filtering through the open door. I fumbled for the switch on the wall, but nothing happened. The bulb was blown. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. The room was a wreck, but not from violence. It was the wreckage of survival. Clothes were piled in corners. Cans of soup sat open on the dresser. Papers were scattered everywhere. My credit reports, printouts of my social media utility bills. Mommy, Elsie screamed. She broke from my grip and ran toward the space between the bed and the wall. I swung the light. A woman was lying on the floor. She was curled into a fetal position, wrapped in a thin motel blanket. Her hair was dark, cut in a bob exactly like mine, but it was matted with sweat. Elsie threw herself onto the woman. Mommy, wake up. I brought Vi. I brought her. The woman groaned. It was a dry, rasping sound. I knelt beside them. I touched the woman's forehead. She was burning up. Her skin was dry and papery. She wasn't beaten. There were no bruises on her face, no cuts. She was dying of neglect. She was dehydrated and consumed by a fever that had likely been raging for days. Water, she croaked. Her eyes fluttered open. They were glassy and unfocused. I am calling 911, I said, pulling my phone away from the light. No, the woman gasped. She tried to grab my wrist, but her grip was weak, like a bird's claw. No police. He tracks the police scanners. You are dying, I said bluntly. You need an 4. You need a hospital. I dialed the number. I gave the operator the address and the room number. I told them I had a female, mid-30s, severe dehydration, possible pneumonia. I did not give them my name. While we waited, I went to the bathroom sink and filled a plastic cup with water. I came back and lifted the woman's head. Elsie was stroking her hair, crying softly. It is okay, Mommy, Elsie sobbed. Vi is the fixer. She fixes things. The woman drank greedily, coughing as the water hit her throat. She looked at me, really looked at me. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. She had my nose. She had my chin. She had applied makeup to reshape her eyebrows to match the arch of mine. It was terrifying. You look, she wheezed. You look just like the picture. Who are you? I asked. Lena, she whispered. Lena Hart. Why, Lena? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and pity. Why me? Because her eyes rolled back slightly, then focused again. Because you were perfect. No family, no husband. Good credit. You were a ghost just like I wanted to be. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. They are coming, I said. You have to tell them the truth. He will kill me, she wept. Caleb, he will kill me if I talk. The hospital waiting room was a purgatory of white walls and vending machines. I had been there for 3 hours. The nurses had looked at me with confusion when the paramedics brought Lena in, noting the uncanny resemblance. I had simply told them I was her sister. It was the easiest lie to tell, and in a way it felt true. We were sisters in this twisted narrative. Elsie was asleep across 2 chairs, her head on my lap. I stroked her hair mechanically. I had never comforted a child before tonight, but the motion felt ancient, instinctual. A doctor came out. Ms. Watson. I stood up. How is she? She is stable, the doctor said. Severe dehydration and a nasty viral infection. She was lucky you found her. Another 12 hours and her kidneys would have shut down. She is asking for you. I followed the doctor into the room. Lena was propped up on pillows, and 4 lines snaking into her arm. The color had returned to her face, making the resemblance between us even more jarring when the door clicked shut, leaving us alone. Lena flinched. Where is Elsie? She asked immediately. She is asleep in the hall. She is safe, I said. I pulled a chair close to the bed. Now, Lena, you are going to talk to me. You are going to tell me how a woman I have never met has my social security number, my employment history, and my signature down to the pressure points. Lena looked at her hands. I worked at Cedarline, she said softly. The world stopped for a second. What, 2 years ago, she said. I was a temp in the scanning department just for 3 weeks during the merger audit. I remembered that time. We had brought in dozens of temporary staff to digitize old archives. They were supposed to be vetted. They were supposed to have limited access. I saw your file, Lena continued. You were the one who flagged the errors in the Smith account. Everyone talked about you. Violet Watson, the machine. Violet Watson, the woman who never makes a mistake. I looked you up. You had everything I didn't. Stability, money, safety. So you stole it. I didn't mean to keep it, she pleaded. I needed an apartment. Caleb, he had kicked me out. I had bad credit. I saw your file on the server. It wasn't encrypted on the local drive. I memorized the number. That explains the credit, I said. But the signature of the school, you didn't just memorize a number. You became me. That signature on the school form, it wasn't a trace. It was practiced. Lena went pale. She looked at the door as if expecting it to burst open. Caleb, she whispered. When he found out I had the apartment, he moved back in. He found the papers. He found your credit report. And he didn't get mad. Lena said, her voice trembling. He got excited. He said we could use it. He said if I was going to be Violet Watson, I had to do it right. He made me practice your signature for hours. He sat at the kitchen table with a ruler and hit my hand if the loop wasn't right. He said the devil is in the details. Caleb Straude, I said. The man listed as the emergency contact. He isn't just a boyfriend. Lena said, tears spilling over. He owes money to bad people. He used your name to take out loans to pay them off, but it wasn't enough. Then he had the idea for the school. Why the school? I asked. Why involve a child? Because single mothers get more grants, Lena said. And because he said it made the identity stick. If Elsie was in school under your name, it created a paper trail that was harder to dispute. It made you real in the community. I felt sick. They had used an innocent child as an anchor for their fraud. They had weaponized motherhood. But he left. I said the apartment was empty. He took the money from the last loan and ran. Lena said, he told me to wait. But then I got sick and the money ran out and the school started calling. I couldn't go pick her up. I was too weak to stand. So you left her there? I asked, my voice rising. You left a 5-year-old girl alone at a school to trigger a call to me. I didn't think they would call you, Lena cried. I thought they would call Caleb. I didn't know he had put your real number on the form. He must have done that to set a trap. A trap for who? For you, Lena said. He said if the scheme ever fell apart, he needed a fall guy. Someone to take the blame for the fraud. If you showed up and claimed the kid, you were validating the identity. My blood ran cold. I had walked right into it. By signing those papers at the school, by taking Elsie, I had legally claimed responsibility for the mess they had created. I need to go, Lena said, trying to sit up. I need to take Elsie and disappear. If Caleb knows I'm alive, if he knows I'm talking, you are not going anywhere, I said firmly. You are broke, you are sick, and you are a fugitive. If you leave, he finds you or the police find you. Then what do? She wailed. You stay here. I said, I don't need you to disappear. Lena, I need you to be a witness. I need you to testify that Caleb Strad coerced you, that he orchestrated this. Can't, she sobbed. He knows things. He knows about the others. What others? Before she could answer, the door opened. A nurse bustled in holding a clipboard. M. Watson, the nurse said, looking at me. Yes, we need to finalize the discharge planning for the little girl, she said. Since the mother is incapacitated and social services is stretched thin tonight, the attending physician noted that you are the legal guardian on record. The nurse handed me a sheet of paper. It was a temporary medical guardianship form. It had been faxed over from the school earlier that evening, likely by the diligent Mrs. Gable before she went home. It listed Violet Watson as the mother. It listed Violet Watson as the guardian. I see, I said, taking the paper. We just need a signature, the nurse said, offering me a pen, to authorize any necessary treatment for the child while her mother recovers. I looked at the paper. I looked at Lena, who was watching me with terrified eyes. If I signed it, I was digging the hole deeper. I was cementing the lie. But if I didn't sign it, they would call Child Protective Services. They would take Elsie away. They would put her in a system that would chew her up. And Lena, the only witness I had, the only person who could clear my name, would be left vulnerable to Caleb. I needed control. I needed to keep the players on the board where I could see them. I took the pen. I will take care of it, I said. I signed my name, my real name, the same signature that was on the fraudulent documents. The same signature Caleb Strad had forced Lena to practice until her hand bled. The nurse smiled, took the clipboard, and left. I looked at Lena. You are not disappearing, I said. And neither am I. We are going to finish this, but we are going to do it my way. I walked out of the room, back to the hallway where Elsie was sleeping. I sat down next to her and unfolded the paper the nurse had given me. Legal guardian. I was trapped in the identity they had built for me. But as I looked at the sleeping child, I realized something else. Caleb Strad had built this trap assuming I would be a victim. He assumed I would panic, run, or crumble. He didn't know Violet Watson. He didn't know that I fixed broken systems for a living. He had given me a daughter. He had given me a motive. And now he had given me a trail. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I could trust. Not the police, not my boss, but a private number I had found in the depths of the Cedaline database years ago. An independent investigator named Rowan Tate. Tate, I said when he answered, "It's Watson. I have a job and I'm going to pay you triple." The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought an indictment. I had barely slept 2 hours on the stiff armchair in the hospital room before my phone began to vibrate against the plastic armrest. It was not an alarm. It was the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Department. I stepped into the hallway. the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and answered. "This is Violet Watson," I said. My voice was raspy, stripped of its usual corporate polish. "Ms. Watson, this is Deputy Miller." A deep, tired voice replied. "I have a report here from Sandra Pierce, principal of Cypress Ridge Elementary. She claims you picked up a student, Elsie Watson, last night, but failed to return her to the custodial residence listed on file." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache pulsing behind my eyes. "Deputy, I am the one who called you. I am the one who reported the identity theft. That address is empty. It is a fake apartment used to stage a residency." "Miss Pierce tells a different story," the deputy said, his tone hardening. "She says you signed a custodial release, claimed the child, and then vanished. The father, a Mr. Caleb Strad, has contacted the school. He says, you have no legal right to take the child out of the county. The father is a con artist," I snapped. "And I am not the mother. I am the victim of a synthetic identity fraud. According to the paperwork you signed last night, you are the mother," Miller countered. "And right now you are looking at a potential charge for custodial interference. I need you to bring the child to the station today. I am currently at the hospital with the birth mother," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Lena Hart, she is ready to give a statement." "We will take her statement when we see her," Miller said. "Bring the child in, Ms. Watson, or we put out an Amber Alert." The line clicked dead. I stood there staring at the phone. In less than 12 hours, the narrative had been flipped. I was no longer the rescuer. I was the rogue parent. Sandra Pierce was covering her tracks fast by framing me as a rule breaker. She was delegitimizing anything I might say about the school's negligence. I opened my social media apps. I rarely used them, but my notifications were exploding. A video had been posted on a local community Facebook group titled Pine Hollow Concerned Citizens. It was footage from the school security camera. It was grainy, black and white, but the timestamp was clear. It showed me exiting the school doors, dragging Elsie by the hand, but the video had been edited. It started right when I pulled her hand to hurry her out of the rain, making the gesture look violent. Cut out the part where she hugged me. Cut out the part where I buckled her seatbelt. The caption read, "Stranger danger woman claiming to be mom drags child from Cypress Ridge. School board investigating. Share this." It had 300 shares. The comments were a cesspool. "She looks deranged. I saw that car on the highway driving like a maniac. Why did the school let her go?" I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. This was coordinated. The principal releases the narrative to the police. Someone else leaks the footage to the public. They were closing the net. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID made my stomach drop. Cedalline Risk Analytics HR. I took a breath and answered, "Hello, Violet." The voice was crisp. It was Sarah from Human Resources. "We need you in the office now." "I took a personal day," I said. "I have a family emergency." "Mark Veltman wants to see you," Sarah said, ignoring my excuse. "He says it concerns a compliance breach. It is not optional. Violet, if you are not here in an hour, we have to initiate a remote lockout of your credentials." A lockout meant I would lose access to the servers. I would lose the ability to track the fraud. I would be blind. "I will be there," I said. I went back into the room. Lena was awake, eating lime jello with a trembling hand. Elsie was sitting on the end of the bed watching cartoons with the sound off. "I have to go to work," I told them. "I have called a friend. His name is Rowan Tate. He is a private investigator. He is going to sit outside this door until I get back. Do not open it for anyone else. Not a nurse you do not know. Not the police. No one." Lena looked terrified. You are leaving us. I am going to keep my job so I can pay for this hospital room, I said grimly, and so I can figure out who sold my data to your boyfriend. I drove back to Kansas City in a blur of speed and anxiety. I changed into a fresh suit I kept in my trunk for emergencies. I applied concealer to the dark circles under my eyes. When I walked into the glass and steel lobby of Citiline, I looked like Violet Watson's senior risk analyst. I did not look like a woman harboring a fugitive child. Mark Veltman's office was on the 42nd floor. The view was spectacular, overlooking the city, but the temperature inside was always set to a freezing 68 degrees. Mark was sitting behind his desk, a sleek surface of black marble. He was a man who wore $5,000 suits and smiled with his mouth, but never his eyes. "Violet," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Close the door." I sat. Sarah said this was urgent. Mark folded his hands on the desk. He didn't ask about the police report. He didn't ask about the viral video, though I was sure he had seen it. Cedarly had algorithms that scrub the web for employee mentions. "We received a flag on your account," Mark said smoothly. "Unusual activity. And then we get a call from a school administrator in Arkansas claiming you were on their premises making accusations about data security." "I was the victim of identity theft," I said, keeping my voice level. "Someone used my Citiline credentials to enroll a child. They forged my signature. They had my employee ID number." Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is unfortunate, but my concern is the company's liability. Did you access any internal files while you were there?"
No, primelit.
"Did you take any photographs?" Mark asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and specific. He didn't ask if I found the imposter. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked if I took photos. Photographs of what I asked, playing dumb. "Of the school records," Mark said, his voice dropping a decibel. "The administrator, Ms. Pierce, mentioned you were photographing documents that might contain proprietary formatting or third-party vendor codes. You know our policy on data retention. Violet, if you have company data on a personal device, that is a firing offense." I looked at him, really looked at him. Mark Veltman was the head of risk. He should be furious that an employee's data was stolen. He should be launching an internal audit to see how Lena Hart got my file. Instead, he was terrified that I had evidence. "I took photos of my own forged signature," I said carefully, "to prove I didn't sign it. Is that a problem, Mark?" Mark leaned back. The leather of his chair creaked. "It becomes a problem if those photos end up in a courtroom. We are in the middle of a merger. Violet, we cannot afford a headline about a data leak at Citiline. If this gets messy, legally messy, we will have to cut ties for the good of the firm." "Are you threatening me?" "I am managing risk," Mark said. "Take a leave of absence unpaid. Sort this out, but do not bring Citiline into it and delete the photos." "I will take the leave," I said, standing up. "But I keep my phone." I walked out of his office with my heart hammering against my ribs. He knew. He definitely knew the promptness of his reaction, the specific worry about the photos Mark Veltman was covering for something bigger than a simple hack. I got back to my car and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from the hospital. I dialed Lena back. He called. Lena whispered. She sounded like she was hyperventilating. "Who?" "Caleb," she said. "He called the room phone, the hospital landline." "How did he know you were there?" I asked, putting the car in gear. He said, "Tell Violet her boss sends his regards." I slammed on the brakes before I even left the parking garage. Mark Veltman had told Caleb. Or the system Mark protected was feeding information directly to Caleb. They were connected. "Is Tate there?" I asked. "He is outside," Lena said. "But Caleb said he is coming for Elsie. He said he has the paperwork." "Listen to me," I said. "Pack your things. Check yourself out against medical advice. I am sending Tate in to get you. I am coming back. I hung up and pulled up my credit report again. I needed to see the full picture. I had looked at the recent loans, but I hadn't looked further back. I scrolled to the 6-month mark. There were more than loans. Verizon wireless account. For lines. Active luxury apartment rental. Little Rock lease signed 5 months ago. Broken last month. Medical debt. $3,000 for pediatric DNA screening. DNA screening. Why would they need a DNA screening if they were just stealing money? And then I saw it. A recurring payment of $200 a month to a company called Oakgate Student Services. I searched for Oakgate on my phone browser. It was a shell website. Generic stock photos of happy students. Consulting for a brighter future, but the domain registration was public if you knew how to look. I ran a quick who is search registrant organization Veltman Holdings LLC. Mark's family holding company. My boss wasn't just covering up a leak. He was profiting from it. He was running a side business creating synthetic identities for school enrollments, likely to game the system for funding or grants. And he was using his own employees' clean data as the template. I drove back to Arkansas with a fury that burned brighter than fear. I wasn't just a victim of random fraud. I was livestock in my boss's farm. When I arrived back at the hospital, Tate was waiting by the curb, his large frame blocking the view of the back seat of his sedan. He was a man of few words, an ex-military cop who owed me a favor from a case 5 years ago. "They are in the car," Tate said as I pulled up. "Kid is spooked." I got into the back seat of Tate's car. Elsie was curled up in a ball, her thumb in her mouth. She looked up when she saw me and her face crumpled. "You left," she accused. Her voice was small and broken. "You said you were the fixer, but you left." It broke my heart in a way I didn't know was possible. I had spent my life avoiding attachment, viewing children as liabilities, as chaos. But looking at this little girl who had been used as a pawn by everyone in her life, her mother, her father, my boss, I realized I was the only wall standing between her and the void. "I had to go fight a dragon," I said, sliding in next to her. I pulled her into my arms. She resisted for a second, then melted into my coat. "I am sorry. I will not leave you again. Promise." The bad man called. Elsie whispered into my shirt. He said, "He's my daddy now." "He is not your daddy," I said fiercely. "He is just a man with a pen, and I have a bigger pen." My phone pinged. A new email. It wasn't from work. It was from an encrypted address. Subject: The truth. I opened it. There was no text in the body, just an attachment, a PDF. I opened the file. It was a copy of a permanent guardianship order. It was stamped by a judge in Pine Hollow. It granted full legal custody of Elsie Watson to Violet Watson. And below it, a note typed in red font. "The paper is real. The court recognizes you as the mother. If you try to run, it is kidnapping. If you try to deny it, it is child abandonment. If you try to fight us, you go to federal prison for fraud. Be a good mother. Violet, go home and wait for instructions." I stared at the screen. They had trapped me perfectly. If I told the truth that I wasn't the mother, I admitted to being part of a fraudulent enrollment that I had technically signed for. If I ran with Elsie, I was a kidnapper. If I left her, I was a criminal for abandonment. They didn't want money anymore. They wanted my silence. They wanted me to play the role they had written for me. I looked down at Elsie. She was falling asleep against my chest. "Tate," I said to the front seat. "Drive." "Where to?" Tate asked. "Not to the police," I said. "And not home. We need a war room because I am not going to be a good mother. I am going to be the mother from hell." I sat at the metal desk in Rowan Tate's office. a converted garage that smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. It was not the sleek glass-walled environment of Citaline Risk Analytics, but right now it was the only place in the world where I felt safe. "You need to sleep, Violet," Tate said. He was leaning against the door frame, arms crossed, looking at the spreadsheet I had projected onto the wall. "I cannot sleep," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard of my laptop. "Sleep is a variable I cannot afford right now. I am not a mother. Tate, I am an auditor and I am going to audit this entire nightmare until I find the rounding error that brings it all crashing down." I had turned Tate's office into a war room. On the left monitor, I had the photos of the school documents I had snapped in Principal Pierce's office. On the right, I had my own credit reports, the hospital discharge papers, and a timeline I was constructing minute by minute. I was treating this like a massive corporate fraud case. In my line of work, you do not look for the criminal first. You look for the glitch in the system. You look for the moment the data stopped behaving like reality. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the screen. Tate walked over. "What am I looking at?" "The metadata," I said. I ran the registration forms through a forensic image analyzer. When Mrs. Gable printed these forms for me to sign, she didn't just print a PDF. She printed a file that had been modified 3 hours prior to my arrival. They were prepping the paperwork before you even got there. Tate noted. "Exactly. But look at the original creation date of the digital file," I said, highlighting a string of code. "This document, the enrollment form, was created 6 months ago. But look at the IP address of the uploader." I pointed to the string of numbers 1192.168.4.12. "That is a local IP," Tate said. "Internal network." "It is," I said, my voice cold. "But look at the gateway IP it routed through. That specific static address belongs to a dedicated fiber line in Kansas City." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "It belongs to Citaline," I whispered. "Specifically, it belongs to the subnet used by the Executive Risk Department." "My department," Tate let out a low whistle. "So, the application to put a kid in school in Arkansas was uploaded from a computer down the hall from your office in Missouri." "Mark Veltman," I said. The name tasted like bile. He didn't just know about it. His office was the point of origin. This wasn't a hack, Tate. This was an authorized transmission. I switched tabs to the financial tracking. I followed the money trail from the loans. I continued. The personal loans taken out in my name were deposited into a checking account at a regional bank. That account then wired 70% of the funds to a vendor called Highgate Student Services. "I have heard of them," Tate said, pulling up a chair. "They market themselves as an educational consultancy. Helps get kids into specialized programs. It is a shell." I said. "I ran a corporate entity search. Oakgate has no physical office. Their listed address is a PAO box in a strip mall in Little Rock. But their domain registration, it is linked to a private server hosted by Veltman Holdings. Your boss is running a side hustle," Tate said, "using stolen employee identities to create fake students." "It is bigger than that," I said, staring at the web of connections. "It is not just about fake students. It is about funding. Schools get state and federal money based on enrollment numbers and demographic profiles. Elsie isn't just a prop. She is an asset. A synthetic identity student generates revenue for the school, fees for Oakgate, and kickbacks for whoever is orchestrating the loans. And you are the perfect sigh," Tate finished. "Single, solvent, isolated. If you get caught, they say you are a crazy woman who scammed the system, and they wash their hands of you." I looked over at the couch in the corner. Elsie and Lena were asleep, huddled under a wool blanket. They looked so fragile against the grim backdrop of the office. "I need to prove the documents are fake," I said. "Not just the data, but the physical paper." "The notary," Tate said. The guardianship papers were notarized. Yes, I said. By A. J. Miller in Pine Hollow. I know A. J. Miller. Tate said runs a check-cashing joint behind the gas station on Route 9. Let's give him a call. Put it on speaker. Tate dialed. It rang 4 times before a nervous voice answered. Miller's checks and title. Mr. Miller, Tate said, his voice dropping into a growl that sounded like gravel in a blender. This is Rowan Tate, private investigator out of Kansas City. I am looking at a guardianship stamp you placed on a document for a Violet Watson. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the sound of a chair scraping. I don't recall that name. Sure you do, Tate said. Because I am looking at the date. You stamped it 3 months ago. The problem is Ms. Watson was in a board meeting in Chicago that day. We have the flight logs. So either she has a teleporter or you stamped a document without the signer present. That is a felony. Miller 5 years mandatory minimum. Wait, Miller stammered. Look, I didn't know it was fraudulent. They told me it was a corporate batch. Who is they? I asked, leaning into the phone. The courier, Miller said. Some guy works for Oakgate. He brings me stacks of papers once a month, waivers, enrollment forms, custody agreements. He pays double the fee in cash. He said the parents are remote workers that they sign digitally, and I just needed to validate the hard copies for the school records. You notarized a signature you never witnessed, I said. Everybody does it, Miller cried. It is just paperwork for school funding. Nobody gets hurt. Somebody is getting hurt right now, I said. I want the name of the courier. I don't know his name, Miller said. But he drives a black pickup, Dodge Ram, dent in the front bumper. I froze. The truck that had followed me. Thank you, Miller. Tate said, if you destroy your logbook, I will know. He hung up. I looked at Tate. The truck. It is the same guy. Caleb Straude. Tate said, he isn't just Lena's abusive ex. He is the bagman for the whole operation. I turned back to the screen. I pulled up the scan of the guardianship order again. I zoomed in on the photo of Violet Watson attached to the ID page. It looked like me. It really did. But now that I was looking at it with an auditor's eye, I saw the flaws. Look at the ear, I said. Tate squinted. What about it? That is not my ear, I said. My left earlobe is attached. This one is detached. And look at the lighting on the neck versus the face. The shadows don't match. Photoshop. More advanced. I said synthetic media. They took my corporate headshot and morphed it with someone else's features to bypass facial recognition software that might flag a direct duplicate. They created a person who is 90% me enough to fool a human, but different enough to create plausible deniability if I ever claimed it was my photo. These guys are good, Tate muttered. Scary good, Mommy. A small voice broke our concentration. Elsie was sitting up on the couch, rubbing her eyes. I walked over to her. Hey, did we wake you? She shook her head. She looked at the screen on the wall at the blown-up image of the black truck I had pulled from a traffic cam database. That is Mr. Caleb's truck, she said matter-of-factly. Yes, I said gently. Elsie, did Mr. Caleb ever come inside the apartment? The one with the dragged marks? Sometimes, she said, mostly he stood outside by the window. I felt a chill by the window. He checked. She said he wanted to make sure we were acting right. He said if I looked out and saw him, I had to smile. If I didn't smile, Mommy got in trouble. Did he ever talk to you on the phone? I asked. No, Elsie said. He doesn't like phones. He says phones have ears. He told Mommy never to call anyone. He said if we used the phone, the risk lady would come and eat us.
Esther here.
The risk lady. That is you, Elsie said, pointing a small finger at me. He said you were a monster. He said you ate children who didn't follow the rules. My stomach turned. They hadn't just used my name. They had turned me into the boogeyman in this child's life. They had demonized me to ensure that if I ever did show up, Elsie would be terrified. That was why she had been so hesitant at first. That was why the recognition was mixed with fear. I am not a monster, Elsie, I said softly. I am the one who checks the rules to make sure they are fair. She looked at me, studying my face. You don't look like a monster. You look like the picture, but sadder. I stood up. Couldn't be sad. I had to be angry. Anger was useful. Sadness was inefficient. Tate, I said, we need him to admit it. We need Caleb on tape acknowledging that the guardianship is a sham. He won't talk to you. Tate said, he knows you are smart. He knows I'm an analyst. I corrected. He thinks I am a bureaucrat. He thinks I am terrified of losing my job and my reputation. We need to play to that. We need to make him think I am breaking. How? I am going to text the number. I said the burner he used to threaten me. I am going to offer him a deal. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I typed the message to unknown message. You win. I cannot handle the police. I cannot handle the video. I will sign whatever you want. I just want to give the girl back. Tell me where. I showed it to Tate. He nodded. Send it. I hit send. We waited. The silence in the garage was heavy. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The phone buzzed. Message. Smart choice. Bring her to the loading dock behind the Cedar building. Midnight alone. Bring the original papers. He wants the papers. I said he wants to destroy the hard copies. And he wants you at Cedar. Tate noted. That is bold. Bringing you right back to the source. It is not bold. I said it is convenient. Mark Veltman can oversee it. They can make it look like a late-night work meeting if anyone asks. We are not going to Cedar. Tate said that is a killbox. I know, I said. But now we know he is desperate for the papers, which means the digital copies aren't enough for him. He needs the physical evidence gone. Suddenly, my laptop beeped. Emotion alert. I had set up a remote link to my home security system in Aurora Heights before I left. I pulled up the feed. It was grainy night vision. The camera was mounted above my garage, pointing at the driveway. A figure was walking up my driveway. They were wearing a dark hoodie. They didn't go to the door. They went to the curb to my trash cans. Who is that? Tate asked, leaning in. I don't know, I said. But today is not trash day. The figure opened the lid of my recycling bin. They pulled out a flashlight. They were digging, sifting through my shredded mail, my discarded receipts. They are looking for something, Tate said. No, I said, watching the figure pull a clear plastic bag out of their pocket and drop it into my bin. They are not looking. They are planting. My heart stopped. What did they just drop? Tate asked. I don't know, I said. But if the police raid my house tomorrow morning, whatever is in that bag is going to be the final nail in my coffin. The figure closed the lid and walked away, disappearing down the dark suburban street. They are accelerating the timeline, I said, my voice trembling with rage. They know I'm investigating. They are going to frame me for something worse than custodial interference. Drugs, stolen corporate data. It doesn't matter. We need to get that bag, Tate said, grabbing his jacket. Now it is an hour drive, I said. By the time we get there, the police might already be there. If that was a setup, the anonymous tip has already been called in. I looked at the screen at the innocent blue recycling bin standing at the end of my driveway. It looked so normal, just a plastic bin in a quiet neighborhood. But it was now a weapon. We don't go back, I said. If we go back, we get arrested. If we stay here, we are fugitives. So what is the play, Violet? Tate asked. We are running out of board space. I looked at Elsie, then at the image of the black truck, then at the IP address linking back to my own office. We stopped playing defense, I said. I am done verifying their data. It is time to corrupt their file. I turned to my laptop. I am going to log into Citaline, I said. You said they would lock you out, Tate warned. They will, I said. But I wrote the lockout protocols. I know the back door. I am going inside the system. Tate, I am going to find the list. The list of every fake student, every stolen identity, every dollar Mark Veltman has funneled through Oakgate. That is hacking, Tate said. That is a federal crime. I am already a kidnapper and a fraudster according to the state of Arkansas. I said, my fingers hovering over the keys. I might as well add corporate espionage to my resume. I hit enter. The screen went black. Then a green command prompt blinked into existence. I was in. Let's see what you are hiding. Mark, I whispered. The investigation was over. The counterattack had begun. The silence in Tate's garage was not peaceful. It was the pressurized silence of a submarine diving too deep. My laptop screen was the only window I had left into the world I used to control. And that world was rapidly reconfiguring itself to strangle me. My phone rang. It was not a blocked number this time. It was a local number from Pine Hollow. I looked at Tate. He signaled for me to answer and tapped the record button on his console. This is Violet, I said. Ms. Watson, good evening. The voice was smooth, baritone, and terrifyingly calm. It was not the voice of a man who breaks into houses. It was the voice of a man who sells insurance or perhaps used cars. It was Caleb Strad. Caleb, I said. I kept my voice flat. I assume you are calling about the surrender terms. I am calling to correct a misunderstanding, Caleb said. He sounded almost disappointed. You seem to be under the impression that you have leverage. You do not. You are currently in possession of a minor child. Elsie Watson, you signed a custodial document acknowledging responsibility for her, but you have removed her from her school district without the consent of her father. That is kidnapping. Violet, you are not her father, I said, and I am not her mother. We both know that. The state of Arkansas does not know that, Caleb replied. The paperwork says otherwise. The paperwork which you signed in front of a school administrator says, you are the custodial parent, and I am the father on the birth certificate. If you do not return my daughter to the designated drop-off point by tomorrow morning, I will file a formal Amber Alert. You are a smart woman. You know what happens to women who steal children. The police do not ask about identity fraud first. They shoot the tires out first. He was using the bureaucracy against me. He knew exactly how the system worked. He knew that the paperwork he had forged was now the only reality the law recognized. If I fought it, I was admitting to fraud. If I accepted it, I was a kidnapper. You do not want Elsie, I said. You want the silence. I want my family back. Caleb said, his voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like ice cracking. You walked into a situation that had nothing to do with you. You should have just stayed in Kansas City and paid your bills. Now you are holding property that does not belong to you. Property. He slipped. He didn't say my daughter. He said property. I am not bringing her to you. I said I am bringing her to a federal judge. Caleb laughed. It was a dry, short sound. There is no federal judge. Violet. There is just you, me, and the local sheriff who plays poker with me on Thursdays. Check your email. Mark sends his love. The line went dead. I looked at Tate. He is friends with the sheriff. Small towns, Tate muttered. It happens, but he slipped. He called her property. It is not enough for a warrant, I said. It is just hearsay. My email chimed. A notification from Citaline Risk Analytics. It was from Mark Veltman. The subject line read, Urgent Compliance Review. Action required. I opened it. It was a Docune link. A formal disciplinary memorandum to Violet Watson, Senior Analyst from Mark Veltman, Director of Risk, erratic conduct, and unauthorized data access. This memorandum serves as a formal warning regarding your behavior on October 24th. Reports indicate you impersonated a corporate representative to harass a client Cypress Ridge Elementary and utilized company resources for personal disputes. Furthermore, your refusal to return to the office constitutes job abandonment. Please sign below to acknowledge receipt of this warning. Failure to sign will result in immediate termination for cause. I stared at the screen. He is papering the file. What does that mean? Tate asked. It is an HR tactic, I explained, my fingers hovering over the mouse. He knows I might testify. If I testify later that Citiline was involved in fraud, he needs to discredit me. If I sign this, I am admitting to erratic behavior and harassment. If I go to court later, his lawyers will pull this out and say, "Look, she was unstable. We disciplined her months ago. This is just a revenge fantasy from a fired employee. If you don't sign it, then he fires me for insubordination." I said, and I lose my access to the internal network. I lose the ability to track the money. It was a pincer movement. Caleb was squeezing me with criminal law. Mark was squeezing me with employment law. They were dismantling my credibility piece by piece. "Don't sign it," Tate said. "If you sign it, you give them the narrative. If I don't sign it, the timer starts." I said, "I probably have 24 hours before it cuts my credentials." I closed the tab. I didn't sign. "We need to follow the money," I said, "before they lock me out." I pulled up the Oakgate financial records I had scraped earlier. I had the ledger, but I hadn't connected the dots on the why. Why go through all this trouble for a few thousand in loans? "Look at this," I said, projecting the spreadsheet onto the wall again. Oakgate receives payments from the Pine Hollow School District. Monthly payments labeled consulting fees and student support services. That is normal. Tate said schools outsource things. Not this much. I said, "Look at the amount. $12,000 a month, and it scales. It goes up every time a new student is enrolled." I cross-referenced the names. I pulled up a list of students enrolled through Oakgate. There were 23 names. One of them was Elsie Watson. 23 students, I murmured. At $12,000 a year in state funding per head, that is over $250,000. That is not exactly cartel money, Tate said. It seems like a lot of work for a few $100,000. It is not just the state funding, I said, digging deeper into the Citiline vendor list. Look at the other incoming transfers to Oakgate. They are coming from a company called Apex Data Solutions. Who is Apex? Apex is a client of Citiline. I said they buy demographic data. They pay for market research, but look at the dates. Apex pays Oakgate exactly one day after Oakgate enrolls a new batch of students. I realized the scope of it. It is a double dip, I said, feeling sick. They are not just stealing tax money from the school district. They are using the fake students to puff up the school's demographic data, making the district look like it has higher diversity or higher need, which triggers federal grants. And then they are selling the data of these parents, people like me, to third-party marketing firms as active high-spending families. They are farming you, Tate said. They are creating fake families to harvest government grants and sell the data. And Elsie is just a placeholder, I whispered. A biological necessity to make the paperwork valid. If there is no kid in the seat, the funding stops. I looked over at the couch. Lena was awake. She was staring at the ceiling, looking hollow. "Lena," I said, "when you signed the papers, did you ever meet the principal?" Lena turned her head slowly. "Mrs. Pierce, yes. She was the one who gave me the pen." I walked over to the couch. "Tell me exactly what happened." "Caleb took me to the office," Lena said, her voice trembling. "It was after hours, just like when you went. Mrs. Pierce was there. She had the stack of papers. She didn't ask for my ID. She didn't ask for Elsie's birth certificate. She just pointed to the lines and said, "Sign here, here, and here. We will fill in the dates later." She knew. I said she wasn't duped. She was part of it. She was mad at Caleb once. Lena recalled, "I heard them arguing in the parking lot." She said, "The head count is low. I need 3 more by the census date or we lose the Title I status." Caleb told her not to worry, that he had fresh profiles coming from the city. "Fresh profiles," I repeated. "That is me. That is my data." And then Lena hesitated. When I got sick, when I stopped answering the phone, Caleb got scary. But Mrs. Pierce was worse. She called me and said, "If that kid is not in school on Monday for the attendance count, I am calling the cops on you." That is why they called you, Violet. It wasn't about saving Elsie. It was about the head count. If Elsie wasn't physically present and signed out by a guardian, they couldn't bill the state for her attendance that week. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying finality. Sandra Pierce wasn't a lazy bureaucrat pushing responsibility. She was the architect of the local leg of the scheme. She needed the bodies to keep her school's funding inflated. Caleb provided the fake families using Mark Veltman's stolen data. Oakgate laundered the money, and when Lena collapsed, the chain broke. They needed a body to sign for the kid, so the paper trail remained unbroken. They called me the real Violet Watson, assuming I would be confused. Sign the paper to help, and then they could threaten me into silence later. They just didn't expect me to steal the child. "We have to go to the FBI," Tate said. "With what?" I asked. "The testimony of a fugitive junkie and some spreadsheets I illegally hacked. Mark will bury me. He will say I manipulated the data. He will say Lena is crazy." I checked my phone again. I had alerts from my home security system. I opened the app. It wasn't a motion alert. It was a community alert from the Aurora Heights Neighborhood Watch app. Someone had posted a screenshot of the kidnapping video. Neighbor alert: police were at 4 and 2 Maplewood this morning. The homeowner, Violet Watson, is wanted for questioning regarding a child abduction ring. Keep your doors locked. I scrolled through the comments. These were people I waved to, people I shared a fence with. Mrs. Gable next door. I always knew something was off. She never put up Christmas lights. Across the street, I saw a strange truck there last night, probably a drug drop.
Mradzi.
Someone said she buys identities. Check your credit reports. People, I felt a wave of nausea. They were isolating me. They were turning my sanctuary into a crime scene. Couldn't go home. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go to the police. They are winning the PR war, I said. By the time I get to court, no jury will believe me. I will just be the crazy lady who stole a kid. My laptop dinged. A new email. This one was not from Mark. It was from Cypress Ridge Elementary Administration. Subject: official demand for student return. I opened it. It was a scanned letter on official school letterhead signed by Sandra Pierce. Dear Ms. Watson, it has come to our attention that the student Elsie Watson has been removed from the district during a mandatory testing period. As the legal guardian of record, you are required to present the student for the state standardized assessment tomorrow, October 25th, at 8 o'clock in the morning. Failure to present the student will result in an immediate referral to Child Protective Services for educational neglect and truancy. This is a non-negotiable state mandate. We are willing to overlook the irregularities of the pickup if the student is returned to her educational environment immediately. It is a trap, Tate said, reading over my shoulder. They want you to bring her back to the school. It is a brilliant trap, I said, admiring the cruelty of it. If I don't bring her, they call CPS for truancy. CPS takes Elsie. Once Elsie is in the system, Caleb, who has the fake birth certificate, claims her as the father. I lose her. But if you bring her, Tate finished. Caleb will be waiting in the parking lot, and once she is inside those doors, you never see her again. They are using the school as a fortress, I said. They know I cannot storm an elementary school. It is the perfect defensive position. I looked at Elsie. She was drawing on the back of an old envelope. She was drawing a blue house. Violet Tate said, "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking that they are right." I said, "I need to bring her back to school." "Are you insane?" "No," I said, turning to him with a look that I usually reserved for when I found $1 million error in a client's ledger. "I am going to bring her back, but I am not going to do it alone, and I am not going to do it quietly." I pointed to the calendar on the wall. "Tomorrow is the state standardized assessment," I said. "Do you know who oversees those tests?" "No." "State auditors," I said. "Independent monitors from the Department of Education. They have to be physically present in the building to ensure no cheating occurs." I smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Sandra Pierce wants a student body," I said. "I am going to give her a spectacle. We are going back to Pine Hollow, Tate. But we are going to make sure that when we walk through those doors, the whole world is watching." "How?" Tate asked. "I have one card left to play," I said, reaching for my phone. "Caleb threatened me with the law. Mark threatened me with HR. Sandra threatened me with truancy. But they forgot one thing." "What?" "I am a risk analyst," I said, "and I know exactly what scares an insurance company more than a lawsuit." "What scares them?" "A liability event," I said. "I am going to trigger a liability event so big that Citiline will have to send a team to investigate just to save their own stock price." I started typing a new email. This one wasn't to Mark. It was to the chief legal officer of Citiline's biggest competitor. Subject: whistleblower disclosures regarding systematic fraud at Citiline Risk Analytics. "Pack the car," I told Tate. "We are going to school." We were not going to sleep. The garage was cold, but the heat radiating from my laptop felt like a physical weight. I had pulled the enrollment logs for Cypress Ridge Elementary going back 5 years. It was a tedious, idling task, the kind I usually assign to junior associates. But tonight, every cell was a potential smoking gun. "Look at the slope," Tate said, pointing a thick finger at the trend line projected on the wall. "Pine Hollow has a declining population. The lumber mill closed 3 years ago. Families moved out. The census data shows a 12% drop in residents under the age of 18. But the enrollment at Cypress Ridge is up," I said, tracing the red line that defied gravity. "It is up by 8% in the last 18 months. "Exactly," Tate said. "Ghosts. They are filling the empty desks with ghosts to keep the state funding flowing." I isolated the new enrollments. There were 23 of them in the last fiscal year. 23 students who had transferred in from out of state, all with perfect paperwork, all placed in the independent study or remote monitoring programs that required minimal physical attendance. "I am going to cross-reference the parents," I said. I started running the names of the guardians listed for these 23 children. Elsie Watson, Mother Violet Watson, Tyler Davis, Mother Sarah Davis, Emily Chong, Father Robert Chong. I stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. "I know him," I whispered. "Who?" Tate asked. "Robert Chong," I said. "He works in compliance at Citiline. He sits 3 desks down from me. He is single. He plays World of Warcraft on weekends. He does not have a daughter named Emily." I typed frantically. I pulled up the Citiline employee directory on the cached version I had saved. Sarah Davis, I read. Marketing Kansas City branch, James Miller, I read the next one. The support Kansas City branch. I sat back, the chair groaning under the sudden shift of weight. "It is not just me," I said, feeling the horror wash over me. "It is a farm. Mark Veltman is harvesting the identities of his own employees. specifically the ones who are single, childless, and financially stable, and he is selling them to the school district as parents. He picked the perfect victims, Tate said, his voice grim. People with good credit who wouldn't notice a few soft inquiries. People who aren't checking school board minutes in Arkansas. And look at the contact emails, I said, highlighting a column. They are all different domains. Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook. But look at the syntax. First name dot last name dot month year. A script. Tate nodded. Bot generated. Chum. 23 synthetic families. I said 23 fake lives. And Elsie. Elsie was just the one that malfunctioned because the actor playing the mother got sick. I looked over at the couch. Lena was awake, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest. She had heard us. I tried to tell them, Lena said softly. Her voice was stronger now, fueled by the anger of the revelation. 6 months ago, before I got sick, I found a letter in the mailbox addressed to Violet Watson. It was a welcome packet from the school. I asked Caleb why we were using a real person's name. What did he say? I asked. He hit me, Lena said, touching her jaw as if the bruise were still fresh. He said I was asking questions that would get us killed. But I was scared, so I called Oakgate. I found the number on a brochure Caleb left in the truck. You called Oakgate Student Services, I asked. A woman answered. Lena said, she sounded nice. I told her I wanted to report a fraud. I told her my boyfriend was using fake papers. And then 10 minutes later, Caleb came home. Lena said, tears filling her eyes. He was on the phone with someone. He was furious. He dragged me into the bedroom and showed me a piece of paper. It was a loan application. He said, you signed this. If you talk, you go to jail for bank fraud. And while you are in jail, I will put Elsie in a foster home where they lock the closets. I closed my eyes. It was the perfect silence machine. Debt and custody. They used the two things a mother fears most, losing her child and losing her freedom to keep the scheme running. Who did he talk to? I asked. On the phone. He called him the architect, Lena said. But once he forgot to hang up, I heard a voice on the speaker. A man. He had a deep voice. He told Caleb, fix the leak or I will plug it myself. Mark. I whispered. It sounded like Mark Veltman. I turned back to the computer. I need to prove the money trail. I need to link Mark to Oakgate. The IP address isn't enough. I need a deposit slip. I went back to the loan that had been taken out in my name. The $5,000 from Quick Cash personal loan. I had traced it to Oakgate's account earlier, but where did it go from there? I hacked into the routing history. It took me 20 minutes to bypass the encryption on the Oakgate vendor portal using a backdoor password that I knew Mark used for all his secure accounts. His daughter's birthday, July 17, 2010. I pulled the disbursement ledger. Oakgate outgoing wires to Pine Hollow Independent School District, $12,000 to Pine Hollow. Independent School District, $12,000. And here's the kickback, I said, scrolling down. Development Strategic Consulting LLC, $4,000. Development Strategic Consulting LLC, $4,000. Velman Strategic Consulting, Tate read. Let me guess. Registered in Delaware. Nevada, I said, checking the registration. Managed by Linda Veltman. His wife, Tate said. He is embezzling the school funding. I said. He creates the students using stolen data. The school gets the state grant. The school pays Oakgate a consulting fee for bringing in the students. Oakgate kicks 40% of that fee back to Mark's shell company. It is a circle of theft and the taxpayers are footing the bill. And you, Tate said, pointing at my name on the screen. You are the loose end. No, I said, a realization hitting me like a physical blow. I am not the loose end. I am the scapegoat. I stood up and paced the small room. Think about it, Tate. Why did Mark threaten me so aggressively? Why did he try to force me to sign that warning about erratic behavior? Why did he suspend me to discredit you? More than that, I said he wants me to be the criminal. If the scheme blows up, and schemes like this always blow up, eventually he needs a villain. He has 23 fake files. If the auditors come, he can point to me. He can say, "Look at Violet Watson. She was a rogue employee. She stole data. She created a fake child to defraud the school. We fired her as soon as we found out. He is framing you for the whole operation." Tate said, "That is why he needs the police to arrest me." I said, "If I am arrested for kidnapping and identity theft, my credibility is zero. Anything I say about Mark Veltman will look like a desperate lie from a woman trying to cut a deal." I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the morning. "We have to nuke the site," I said. "We cannot go to the Pine Hollow police. Caleb plays poker with the sheriff. We cannot go to the FBI field office in Kansas City yet. Mark has contacts there from the Corporate Security Board." State Prosecutor Tate said, "Arkansas Attorney General's Office. The Public Integrity Unit. They hate school fraud. It makes them look good in election years. Do you have a contact?" "I know a guy." Tate said he is a bulldog. "If we give him this package, the IP logs, the wire transfers to Mark's wife, the notarized forgeries, he will send a SWAT team, not a patrol car." "Do it," I said. "I will compile the dossier. You make the call." I spent the next hour assembling the digital evidence. I organized it not like a victim, but like a prosecutor. Exhibit A, the forged signature. Exhibit B, the internal IP address. Exhibit C, the money trail. I zipped the file. Tate sent it via an encrypted Dropbox to his contact. "It is done," Tate said. "He will see it when he walks in at 8. My phone rang. It was a blocked number, but I knew who it was. I put it on speaker. I hit record. "Ms. Watson." It was Sandra Pierce, the principal. Her voice was shaking. She sounded like a woman standing on a ledge. "Principal Pierce," I said. To what do I owe the pleasure? Is it about the truant officer?" "We need to resolve this," she said quickly. I spoke to the board. "We are willing to make an exception. If you return the student files and the student, we can waive the police report. We can label it a clerical error." "A clerical error?" I asked. "You mean the part where you forged my signature 23 times? "I didn't forge anything," she hissed. "I just processed what was given to me. Look, Violet, Ms. Watson, you don't understand the pressure. The district was going to cut our budget. We would have lost the art program. We would have lost the special needs aides. We needed the numbers. So, you stole my life to pay for art supplies?" I asked coldly. "It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone," she pleaded. "It was just paper. Please, if you release those documents you took photo of, I lose my pension. I go to jail. You should have thought about that before you threatened to have me arrested for abandonment," I said. "Wait," she cried. "I can help you. I can testify that Caleb brought the files. I can give you the dates." "I don't need your help, Sandra," I said. "I have the receipts." I hung up. "She is cracking," Tate said. "She knows the ship is sinking." The phone rang again immediately. "She is persistent," I muttered. I answered. "Sandra," I said. "It is not Sandra." The voice was low. "Caleb, you have been busy." "Violet," Caleb said, sending emails to legal departments, checking bank routing numbers. "You are making a lot of noise for a woman who is wanted for kidnapping." "I'm just doing my job." "Caleb," I said. "Risk assessment." "Here is your assessment," Caleb said. "I am done playing with paperwork. I am done with Mark's little games. I want the girl, and I want the original file you took from the office. I told you. I said I am not giving her to you." "You are," he said, "because if you don't, I am going to pay a visit to the Driftwood Motel. I know you moved Lena, but I know where she is. Pine Hollow is my town. Violet, there are only so many places to hide a sick junkie. He didn't know we had Lena. He was bluffing, but he was dangerous. What do you want? I asked, feigning defeat. Meet me, he said. The superstore parking lot off Highway 65. The back row near the loading docks. 8 in the morning. Bring the girl, bring the file, and I will give you a signed affidavit stating that I gave you permission to take her. It clears you of the kidnapping charge. You walk away. You go back to your nice, boring life in Kansas City. And Elsie stays with her father, he said. I looked at Elsie, who was sleeping peacefully now, unaware that she was being traded like a commodity. I need to see the affidavit first, I said. You will see it when you get there. Caleb said 8 o'clock. If I see a cop car, I drive away. And the next time you see Elsie, it will be on a milk carton. Click. I looked at Tate. He wants to meet, I said. 8 a.m. Superstore parking lot. It is a setup. Tate said he is not going to give you an affidavit. He is going to take the girl and probably put you in the hospital or worse. I know, I said, but he is panicked. He is reacting to the pressure. He is breaking protocol. Mark would never authorize a face-to-face meet in broad daylight. Caleb is going rogue. So what do? We go. I said, Violet, Tate warned. We go, I repeated. But we don't go alone, and we don't go to negotiate. I pulled out a business card I had kept in my wallet for 3 years. It belonged to a forensic accountant I had worked with on a massive embezzlement case. A man who carried a badge and had the power to freeze assets with a phone call. We are taking the financial investigator, I said. And we are taking you. Caleb expects a scared mother. He is going to get a federal audit team. And Elsie, Tate asked. You cannot bring her to a take-own. I have to, I said, my voice shaking slightly. He needs to see her to get out of the truck. If he doesn't see her, he doesn't engage. But she stays in the car with the doors locked and you standing in front of her. This is dangerous, Tate said. My whole life is dangerous now. I said, I am tired of being the victim. Tate, I am ready to be the consequence. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky a bruised purple. Let's go to the supermarket, I said. I need to return some damaged goods. I looked at Elsie through the rear-view mirror of Tate's car. She was humming a quiet, tuneless melody, clutching her worn rabbit. We were 10 minutes away from the meeting point, and the morning sun was cutting through the windshield with a harsh, revealing light. Stop the car, I said. Tate glanced at me. We are on a schedule, Violet. 8 o'clock. Stop the car. I repeated, my voice hard. Tate pulled over onto the gravel shoulder of the highway. The 18-wheelers roared past us, shaking the chassis. I turned around to face Elsie. She looked back at me, trusting and small. Too small. Cannot do it, I said to Tate. Cannot use her as bait. I am a risk analyst. You do not bring the asset into the blast zone. If Caleb sees her, he might grab her. He might have a weapon. If things go wrong, she is the one who bleeds. He won't get out of the truck if he doesn't see the kid, Tate argued. That was the deal. Then I will make him get out, I said. I will make him so angry he forgets about the kid. I pulled out my phone. Call your contact. The retired dispatcher you mentioned, Mrs. Higgins. Does she still live in Little Rock? Yeah, Tate said, realizing what I was doing. About 20 minutes from here. We are dropping Elsie off. I said this ends today, but it ends with her watching cartoons on a safe couch, not ducking behind a dashboard. 40 minutes later, I was standing alone in the vast concrete expanse of the supermarket parking lot. The lot was enormous. A sea of asphalt dotted with early morning shoppers and cart returns. I stood near the loading docks in the back row, exactly where Caleb had instructed. It was the blind spot of the store's cameras. a detail Caleb had likely scouted weeks ago, but it was not a blind spot for us. 3 rows back in a beat-up minivan with tinted windows sat Rowan Tate and Special Agent Vance from the State Financial Crimes Unit. Vance had listened to our recording of the principal. He had seen the wire transfers. He was interested. I tapped the small button on my collar. "Comms check," I whispered loud and clear. Tate's voice crackled in my earbud, which was hidden beneath my hair. "We have eyes on the north and south entrances. Remember, get him to talk. We need him to articulate the intent to defraud. We need the link to Cedar Line." "I know the script," I said. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that defied my calm posture. I was holding a thick manila envelope. It contained copies of the school files, not the originals, but high-quality color copies I had printed at Tate's office. It was the cheese in the mousetrap. At exactly 8 o'clock, a black Dodge Ram rolled into the lot. It moved slowly, prowling like a shark in shallow water. I recognized the dent in the front bumper immediately. It was the truck that had followed me from the school. The truck that had sat outside my apartment, pulled up 10 feet away from me. The engine idled with a low, aggressive rumble. The window rolled down. Caleb Straude sat behind the wheel. He looked different than I expected. He wasn't wearing the flannel shirt from the photo or the hoodie from the night surveillance. He was wearing a crisp polo shirt and sunglasses. He looked like a soccer dad. He looked like a man who had nothing to hide. "Where is she?" he asked. "Good morning to you too, Caleb," I said, stepping forward. I held up the envelope. "I brought the file." "I didn't ask about the file," Caleb said. "I asked about the girl." The deal was the file and the girl. "She is safe," I said. "She is in the car." I gestured vaguely to my sedan, which was parked 2 spaces over. The windows were dark. I had bundled a pile of blankets in the back seat to create a silhouette. "Get her out," Caleb ordered. "Not yet," I said. "I need the affidavit first. I need to know I am not going to jail for kidnapping." Caleb sighed, an exaggerated sound of impatience. He opened the truck door and stepped out. He was tall, looming over me. He held a piece of paper in his hand. "You are making this difficult, Violet," he said, walking toward me. "I am trying to help you. I am trying to clean up a mess you shouldn't be involved in." "I didn't involve myself," I said, keeping my distance. "You involved me when you stole my social security number. You involved me when you forged my signature." "Signature?" Caleb scoffed. "It is just ink on paper. It is a victimless crime. The school gets their funding. Oakgate gets their fee. You get well. You get a headache, I suppose. But nobody dies unless you keep pushing." "Who taught you?" I asked. "Who taught you how to bypass the credit freeze? Who taught you how to structure the loans so they stayed under the fraud alert limit?" "I read a book," Caleb said, glancing at my car. "No," I said, "that was corporate structuring. That was a Cedar Line algorithm. You didn't come up with that. Oakgate didn't come up with that. Someone on the inside gave you the playbook." Caleb stopped. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were cold, flat. "Does it matter?" he asked. "You are out of your depth. Lady, you think because you check spreadsheets you know how the world works? The world runs on favors. It runs on numbers. And we needed the numbers. I pressed. You and Sandra Pierce. Sandra is a nervous wreck." Caleb spat. "She is small time. She just wants her budget. This is bigger than a school budget. It is about the data." I said, "Mark Veltman isn't just funding a school. He's building profiles. He is selling the synthetic identities to Apex Data, isn't he?" Caleb smiled. It was a chilling expression. "You are smarter than Lena. Lena just wanted the rent money. You want to solve the puzzle. Does Mark know you are here?" I asked. "Does he know you are meeting me in a parking lot?" Mark is a partner, Caleb said, stepping closer. Partners trust each other to handle the ground game. Oakgate handles the logistics. I handle the assets. And you, Violet, are currently holding an asset that belongs to the partnership. I am not giving her back to a shell company, I said. She is not a shell company, Caleb shouted, losing his cool for the first time. She is a line item. Do you know how much she is worth over 12 years of schooling? Do you know the multipliers for a single-parent household in this district? She is a H100 Red Grand. Easy. And you are stealing from us. Got it. Tate's voice whispered in my ear. Intent to traffic. Conspiracy to defraud. We have him. But I wasn't done. I needed the final link. So Mark Veltman takes a cut, I said. And you take a cut and the school gets the leftovers. Mark built the road, Caleb said, puffing out his chest. I just drive the truck. Now give me the kid or I break your arm and take her myself. Before I could answer, another car screeched into the row. It was a silver sedan. It pulled up aggressively next to Caleb's truck, nearly clipping his open door. The driver's door flew open. Sandra Pierce scrambled out. She was wearing her school blazer, but her hair was disheveled, her eyes wild. You idiot, she screamed at Caleb. I told you not to meet her. Shut up, Sandra. Caleb snapped. I am handling it. You are not handling anything. Sandra yelled. The auditors are at the school. They are doing a surprise headcount. They are asking for the files on the 23 remote students. They are asking for Elsie Watson. My heart leaped. The email I had sent to the State Department of Education had worked faster than I anticipated. Or maybe Tate's contact had pulled a string. They are at the school. Caleb's face went pale. They are seizing the hard drives. Caleb. Sandra was hysterical. They know someone sent them the internal emails. They know about the kickbacks to Oakgate. She turned to me, her eyes filled with hate. You did this. You ruined everything. I just balanced the ledger. Sandra, I said. We have to go, Caleb said, grabbing Sandra's arm. Forget the kid. We have to clear the safe house. You are not going anywhere, I said. Caleb turned on me. Get out of my way. He reached into his waistband. I saw the glint of metal. A gun. Gun. I shouted. Move, move, move. Tate roared in my ear. The doors of the minivan burst open. Tate and Agent Vance sprinted across the asphalt. Weapons drawn. 2 unmarked police cruisers that had been waiting behind the store surged forward. Sirens wailing. Boxing in the truck and the sedan. Police dropped the weapon. Tate screamed. Caleb froze. He looked at Tate, then at the police cars, then at me. The arrogance evaporated. He looked like exactly what he was, a bully who had finally picked a fight with someone who could hit back. He slowly raised his hands. The gun clattered to the pavement. Sandra Pierce sank to her knees, sobbing. I was forced. He made me do it. As the officers swarmed them, cuffing Caleb and hauling Sandra to her feet. My phone began to ring. I pulled it out of my pocket. Caller ID Mark Veltman. I looked at Tate. He was securing Caleb, but he nodded at me. Answer it. I tapped the screen. I put it on speaker. Violet. Mark's voice was breathless. He sounded like he was running. Violet, listen to me. Do not do anything stupid. It is a little late for that. Mark, I said. I am standing in a parking lot in Pine Hollow. Caleb Stout is in handcuffs. Sandra Pierce is confessing to the state police. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, terrified silence. You don't understand, Mark said. It wasn't stealing. It was creative accounting. We were helping the school. You were laundering money through Oakgate, I said. And you were selling my data. I know about Apex, Mark. I know about the synthetic profiles. Violet, we can fix this. Mark pleaded. I can make you a partner. I can wipe the disciplinary file. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them Caleb went rogue. How do you know I am here? Mark, I asked. How did you know to call me right this second? He hesitated. Because you are tracking me, I said. You have a GPS logger on my phone the same way you tracked Lena. You are watching the dot on your screen right now, aren't you? I was trying to protect the company assets. Mark said, I am the asset, I said. And I am liquidating. Violet, please. Agent Vance is listening. Mark, I said. And so is the recording device on my collar. You just admitted to monitoring an employee and coordinating with a known felon. I heard a sound in the background on Mark's end, a siren, then the sound of a door being kicked in. FBI, step away from the computer. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from the adrenaline crash. Tate walked over to me. He holstered his weapon. We got him, Tate said. Vance has the confession on tape. Caleb admitted the partnership. Mark implicated himself on the call, and with Sandra flipping, the whole Oakgate structure collapses. And Elsie? I asked. Caleb signed the surrender, Tate asked, looking at the papers scattered on the ground where Caleb had dropped them. No, I said, we didn't get to that part. It doesn't matter, Agent Vance said, stepping up. He was a man in a cheap suit with eyes that missed nothing. With Caleb Strad facing federal charges for fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy, he loses all parental rights immediately. The state takes custody. My stomach dropped. The state takes custody. She goes into the system, Vance said, shrugging. Foster care pending a review of the mother's fitness, but given Ms. Hart's condition and involvement, it is likely Elsie will be a ward of the state. I looked at the black truck. I looked at the police cars. I had won. I had destroyed the ring. I had cleared my name. I had taken down the boss who tried to frame me. But if Elsie went into the system, if she went to a stranger's house, then I had failed the only part of this that really mattered. No, I said. Vance looked at me. Excuse me. She is not going into the system, I said. I have a notarized document, fraudulent or not, that says I am her guardian. And until a judge invalidates it, I am the guardian of record. Ms. Watson, Vance warned. That is a legal gray area you do not want to step in. You just proved the document is fake. I proved the signature was forced. I said, my mind racing, spinning the logic as fast as I could. But the intent of the biological mother was to place the child with me. Lena Hart will testify to that. She wanted me to have her. She trusted me. Violet Tate said softly, be careful. You are clearing your name. Don't muddy it up again. I am not muddying it. I said I am taking responsibility. I am the risk analyst. Remember, I control the variables. I looked at Vance. I am taking her home. I said, you know where I live. You have my GPS logs. If you want to come get her, bring a court order. But I am not letting a 5-year-old girl sit in a police station while you file paperwork. Vance studied me for a long moment. He saw the set of my jaw. He saw the way I was gripping the phone. Don't leave the state, Vance said. And have her available for a welfare check at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Done, I said. I turned and walked back to my car. I got in. My hands were trembling as I put the key in the ignition. I drove out of the parking lot, past the police lights, past the handcuffed figures of Caleb and Sandra. I drove toward the highway, toward the safe house where Mrs. Higgins was baking cookies with a little girl who thought I was a hero. Tate's voice echoed in my head. Winning is clearing your name. He was wrong. Winning wasn't about the name on the file. Winning was about making sure the girl in the file didn't disappear. I merged onto the highway. The sun was fully up now. The rain had stopped. I was going to pick up my daughter. The courtroom in Pine Hollow was not the grand mahogany paneled theater I had seen in movies. It was a municipal box with beige walls, fluorescent lighting that buzzed like a trapped fly, and the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. But the tension in the air was heavy enough to crush a man. I sat at the defendant's table. My hands were folded on the scarred wood surface. To my left was a court-appointed attorney who looked like he had graduated law school 3 weeks ago. To my right, the empty chair where a parent usually sat. Across the aisle, Caleb Straude sat with a slick, expensive lawyer from Little Rock. Sandra Pierce sat beside them, looking shrunken in a gray suit that seemed 2 sizes too big for her now. This was an emergency hearing. The docket listed 2 simultaneous matters: the state of Arkansas versus Violet Watson for custodial interference, and in Riel C. Watson, a dependency hearing to determine the safety of the child. Judge Harlan Graves entered. He was an older man with a face like a topographic map of the Ozarks, rugged, lined, and unamused. "We are here to untangle a mess," Judge Graves rumbled, looking over his spectacles. "I have a school principal claiming abduction. I have a father claiming kidnapping, and I have a woman from Missouri claiming the entire population of this town is a hallucination. Let us proceed." The district attorney, a sharp woman named Helen Ross, who Agent Vance had briefed earlier, stood up. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Caleb. "Your Honor," Ross began, "the state is prepared to argue that the defendant, Violet Watson, is not a kidnapper. She is a whistleblower, and the real crime scene is not the parking lot where she took the child. It is the server room of the Cedar Risk Analytics Corporation and the Registrar's office of Cypress Ridge Elementary." Caleb's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, shot up. "Objection. This is a custody hearing, Your Honor. The defendant admitted to taking the child. She signed a confession. We have the document." "Overruled," Graves said. "I want to hear about the server room." Ross nodded and signaled to the bailiff. "The state calls Violet Watson." I walked to the witness stand. I could feel Caleb's eyes boring into the side of my head. I swore to tell the truth. "Ms. Watson," Ross said, "on the night of October 24th, did you sign a document claiming custody of Elsie Watson?" "I did," I said clearly. "And did you subsequently remove the child from the school premises against the wishes of the administration?" "I did." "Why?" "Because it was a hostage situation," I said. The courtroom murmured. I kept my voice steady, the same tone I used when presenting a risk audit to a board of directors. "I did not sign that paper because I believed I was the mother. I signed it because I knew that if I didn't, the principal would hand the child over to the police as abandoned property. And once she was in the system, the man sitting at that table who possessed a fraudulent birth certificate would have claimed her. I signed to buy time. I signed to secure the asset." "The asset?" Judge Graves asked. "The child, Your Honor," I said, "in the scheme orchestrated by Caleb Straude and Mark Veltman. Elsie was not a person. She was a revenue stream. She was an asset valued at $12,000 a year in state funding." Mr. Sterling laughed. "This is a conspiracy theory, Your Honor. My client is a concerned father." "Then let us look at the father's paperwork," Ross said. She turned to the evidence table. "The state submits Exhibit A, the enrollment packet for Elsie Watson." She placed the familiar file on the overhead projector. "M. Watson," Ross asked me, "is that your signature on the bottom line?" I looked at the screen. The looping V, the sharp W. "It is a simulation of my signature," I said. "But it is not my writing." "How can you be sure?" Sterling challenged. "It looks identical." "I called Dr. Aries Thorne," Ross said. I stepped down, and Dr. Thorne took the stand. He was a forensic document examiner with thick glasses and a demeanor that made me look spontaneous. "I have analyzed the exemplar signatures provided by Ms. Watson from her verified employment contracts," Dr. Thorne said, pointing to a laser-enlarged image on the screen. And I have compared them to the signature on the school enrollment form and the notarized custody agreement. And your conclusion, Ross asked. They are visually similar, Thorne said. However, handwriting is not just about shape. It is about pressure and velocity. When a person signs their own name, they do so with ballistic movement fast. Fluid strokes that taper off at the ends. The pen moves faster than the brain. He clicked a button. The screen zoomed in on the ink microscopic level. Look at the school document. Thorne said, see these microscopic tremors in the ink line? See the heavy pooling of ink at the start and stop of each curve. This was not written fast. It was drawn. The writer was moving slowly, mimicking a shape. It is a hesitation tremor. This is a forgery, Your Honor. A practiced one, but a forgery nonetheless. Caleb shifted in his seat. He whispered something angry to his lawyer. Furthermore, Thorne added, the notarization stamp belongs to a J. Miller. Mr. Miller has already provided a sworn affidavit to the state police that he stamped this document in bulk along with 22 others in exchange for cash payments from a man driving a black Dodge Ram. Sterling stood up. Your Honor, even if the paperwork is irregular, my client is the biological father. He has rights. We are getting to that, Ross said. The state submits Exhibit B. The audio recording obtained by private investigator Rowan Tate. The bailiff pressed play on a laptop connected to the courtroom speakers. The sound of wind filled the room. Then my voice. Who taught you? Who taught you how to bypass the credit freeze? Then Caleb's voice. Clear and arrogant. Mark is a partner. Partners trust each other to handle the ground game. Oakgate handles the logistics. I handled the assets. She is 100 grand. Easy. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Caleb's face went from red to a ghostly white. He slumped in his chair. Intent to defraud, Ross said. Intent to traffic a minor for financial gain. Conspiracy to commit identity theft. This recording was obtained without a warrant, Sterling shouted. It was obtained in a public place where there is no expectation of privacy. Ross countered, and it is corroborated by financial records. She held up a thick stack of spreadsheets, the ones I had pulled from the Oakgate server. These records show monthly transfers from the Pine Hollow School District to Oakgate Student Services, Ross explained, and subsequent kickbacks to Veltman Strategic Consulting. We have traced over $250,000 in stolen taxpayer funds. Judge Graves looked at Sandra Pierce. Ms. Pierce, you are the administrator of record. Did you authorize these payments? Sandra stood up. Her legs were shaking so badly she had to grip the table. She looked at Caleb, then at the judge. As she choked on the word. Ms. Pierce, the judge said gently but firmly. This is the moment where you decide if you are a conspirator or a witness. Choose carefully. Sandra burst into tears. He said the school would close. She wailed, pointing a trembling finger at Caleb. He said we didn't have the numbers. He said if we didn't get the enrollment up, the state would consolidate us with the district in Little Rock. I just wanted to save the school. I didn't know he was stealing people's lives. You knew enough to forge the attendance records, Ross said. You knew enough to threaten Ms. Watson. I was scared. Sandra sobbed. Mark Veltman. He called me. He said he would ruin me. He said he knew where my mother lived. Mark Veltman, Ross said, turning to the gallery. Speaking of whom, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. 2 federal agents walked in. Between them in handcuffs was Mark Veltman. He was not wearing his $5,000 suit. He was wearing a rumpled dress shirt, and he looked like a man who had not slept in days. Your Honor, Agent Vance said, stepping forward. We have executed a search warrant at Cedarline Risk Analytics this morning. We recovered deleted drives that matched the IP logs found by Ms. Watson. We also found a dedicated server running the bot script used to generate the fake parent emails. Mark Veltman has been charged with federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Mark looked at me as he was led to the holding area. His eyes were full of hate, but also something else. Respect. He knew I had beaten him at his own game. "The state rests," Ross said. Judge Graves took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "In 30 years on the bench," he said, "I have seen greed. I have seen stupidity. But I have rarely seen such a sophisticated engine of cruelty built on the backs of children." He looked at me. "Violet Watson," he said, "the charges of custodial interference against you are dismissed with prejudice. You acted to protect a minor from an active criminal enterprise. You are free to go." He turned to Caleb. "Caleb Strad, you are remanded to custody without bail pending trial. I suggest you start writing down everything you know because you are looking at 20 years and the child." Ross asked Elsie Watson. The courtroom went quiet. This was the part one dreaded. "The biological mother, Lena Hart, is currently in the hospital. Ross said she has cooperated fully. However, given her history and her role in the fraud, the state recommends." "Your Honor," I stood up. "May I speak?" "Go ahead, Ms. Watson." "Lena Hart was a victim, too." I said she was coerced. She was battered. She was trapped in a financial prison built by the men sitting at that table. If you put Elsie in foster care, you are punishing the child for the crimes of the father. You are completing the trauma. What do you suggest?" Graves asked. "I have filed a petition," I said, handing a document to the bailiff. "It is a kinship care agreement. I am not asking for custody. I am asking for guardianship sponsorship. I have arranged for a secure apartment for Lena and Elsie in Kansas City near my home. I have arranged for Lena to enter a rehabilitation and job training program. I will cover the costs. I will provide the oversight." "Why?" Graves asked. "Why would you do this for a woman who stole your name?" "Because she didn't steal it. I said she borrowed it to survive, and now I am taking it back. But I am not taking the mother away from the daughter. I know what it is like to be a file number. Your Honor, Elsie deserves to be a person." Judge Graves studied the paper. He looked at me, then at the empty chair where a parent should have been. "Petition granted." He said temporary guardianship is awarded to Lena Hart under the supervision of Violet Watson. Review in 6 months. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. It was the best sound I had ever heard. The hallway outside the courtroom was filled with light. The rain had finally stopped and the Arkansas sun was shining through the high windows. Tate was waiting for me. He gave me a rare smile. "You did good, Violet," he said, "for a corporate suit." "I am not a corporate suit anymore," I said. "I think I'm going to open my own firm, independent consulting, risk assessment for the people the system forgets." "You would be good at that," Tate said. Then I saw them. Lena was sitting on a bench near the exit. She looked tired but clean. She was holding Elsie's hand. When Elsie saw me, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood up and walked over to me. She looked different, lighter. The weight of the secret, the weight of Mr. Caleb was gone. "Hi, Vi," she said. "Hi, Elsie," I said, crouching down. "Are we going to the Blue House?" she asked. "No," I said. "We are going to a new house. A real one with no cameras and no secrets." She reached into her pocket and pulled out something. It was a crumpled piece of paper, a drawing. It showed 3 stick figures. One was small, one was a woman with long hair, and one was a woman with short, sharp hair holding a shield. "This is you," she said, pointing to the shield woman. "You fought the dragons." "I fought the spreadsheets," I corrected gently. "But sometimes they are the same thing." She leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around my neck. "Thank you." I hugged her back, and for the first time in my life, The chaos of a child didn't feel like a disruption. Felt like an anchor. I stood up and watched them walk toward the exit, toward the car that would take them to the new life I had engineered for them. Then I realized they could steal my name. They could forge my signature. They could create a synthetic life out of my data and use it to build a prison for a little girl. But they made a fatal error in their calculation. They assumed that because I was alone, I was weak. They assumed that because I had no children, I had no instinct to protect. But the moment I walked into that dark school and felt that small hand grab mine, the algorithm changed. I didn't get my life back by filing a complaint. I didn't get it back by shouting. I got it back by doing the one thing they never expected a victim to do. I became the mother they invented. And I burned their world down with the truth. Thank you so much for listening to Violet's story. It's terrifying to think about how easily our identities can be weaponized against us. Isn't it? I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from today? Are you in your car, at work, or maybe relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the HOA Karen Vlog channel. Like this video and hit that hype button so we can share more stories like this with the world. Stay safe and watch your data.